Why, hello there. To receive each episode of Sacred Symbols 3 days earlier than the public, totally ad-free. To have your questions, comments, and concerns read on the air. To hear your name in the end credits, and to score other cool perks. Please consider supporting this show on Patreon at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. Not only will your subscription net you benefits for Sacred Symbols and allow this show to continue into the future, but those benefits also carry over to other CLS shows too, including the video game-centric YouTube show SideQuest, the retro and nostalgia-themed podcast Knockback, and the eclectic interview series Fireside Chats. In other words, you're getting insane bang for your buck. Again, that's patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. Without you, Sacred Symbols and CLS couldn't and wouldn't exist. Now, on to the show. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, episode 13, I think it is. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Chris Raygun. Chris, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. I have a roach problem.
A roach problem?
Yeah.
I didn't anticipate this.
No, yeah, it's a surprise. I found out yesterday.
Well, how did this manifest?
This happened last year, too, at the same exact time. I moved into my place last year on October 1st, right? And we moved in, and it was like, oh, what a nice place. Covered in roaches. And I was like, all right, great. But it's happening again. I guess it's like seasonal, and I guess because like we're on like the ground floor, it's like just we're doomed for this kind of thing.
Are they appearing like on the floor in the kitchen? Are they appearing in your bedroom? Where are they appearing that you're seeing these things? The bathroom?
We kind of caught it early, so they're not like it's not a bunch of them, but it is a decent enough to be like okay, we should call someone,
right?
You know, but they're actually over there right now, fumigating.
You have to stay away for a little while, or can you go back?
I can go back today. I think they'll be done by the time I get back, especially with traffic.
If I'm going to be honest with you, I don't want to be in that house. Can you imagine how fucking stoned you'd get off those chemicals?
Get a good rest.
You'll sleep 14,
sleep like a baby.
14, 20 hours at least.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I feel like I had a similar thing. It wasn't with roaches, but with ants in San Francisco. In San Francisco, ants are these notorious problems because of rainy season, and they would just appear cyclically, and there was nothing you can really do about it, as far as I could tell, because I had an immaculate clean kitchen, but they wanted the water. They just wanted a place to be out of the rain.
Don't they like hate basil or something?
Is that true?
I think so. There's like some plant that you can plant around. I don't know if that works. It might be just my mom teaching me bullshit.
They come and just take the basil plant away along with everything else that they're trying to
They just steal it.
Take away.
Now you're giving them basil, basically.
Roaches are a little weird because they're so ancient, obviously, and so resilient. And it's ironic that they happen to be this like persistent pest in our homes, but they survived like Armageddon 5 or 6 times with asteroid collisions and all these kinds of things. And it's like your little chemicals, your Auric Man or whatever the fuck it is, isn't going to be able to take this dude out. These guys are living forever.
It's honestly ridiculous. I hate them. Do you like seafood, by the way? Do you like? I like lobsters.
I'm not a seafood guy. I don't mind lobster. It's like one of the few things that I'm like, I'll eat this, but I need to cover it in butter.
They're just roaches. They are roaches, objectively. You cut a roach open, it's gonna look like a tiny lobster. I can't do lobsters for that reason. I'm getting off on a tangent because I'm really angry about these roaches.
Well, this whole show is really like a 13 episode now tangent, so it's perfectly okay.
It's just anger.
I know. It's just immediately I have to get it off my chest.
It's just anger, PlayStation anger.
It's funny, though, because lobsters bother me for a different reason. That we pay lots of money for these things, and you kind of cut them open, and you have all these different kinds of meats, but then you're dipping them in all of these sauces and butters and whatnot that obscure the taste of the lobster. It's just like, why not just get a piece of bread for 5 cents and just dip it in the butter and eat it that way? What is the difference? I don't understand. The seafood, as a man from Long Island, it is very unusual for me to have not grown up in that place addicted to seafood like almost everyone else is there, because you're never more than 7.5 miles I think from the water, and I grew up right on the water. People crabbing and getting lobster and clamming and doing all these kinds of things. I'm like, just keep all that shit away from me. And at my Italian Sunday dinners with my family, they would have all these ornate, even on Christmas Eve when we do the 7 fishes, these ornate seafood meals, and my mom I'm 33 years old, still makes me chicken cutlets and puts them on the side.
Chicken's good. Chicken's a nice, safe meal.
I want terrestrial food. I don't want things that are of the sea. I don't think we're supposed to be down there.
Terrestrial.
Didn't we just have this conversation about the sea? I was having this conversation with someone. It was you, right?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely have this conversation a lot where the sea is a problem.
Yeah, so why are we extracting things from it? Just leave it.
Yeah, leave it be.
Yeah. It's like the Gungas or whatever in episode 1.
I haven't thought about that in years.
They have a symbiotic relationship with the people on the surface. We don't need to, cross paths if we don't want to. We choose to go down there. I don't see a fish coming up here.
That's a good point.
And fucking around like we're fucking around in there.
You don't throw hooks through our lips.
Isn't that weird that we catch fish, especially when you catch and release, that you catch fish and there's like a hook in their mouth and like tearing them up, and then you're like, oh, look at this, and you just throw them back in the water.
Yeah, it's really messed up, actually.
It's very weird. It's like, I think maybe killing him is the more humane option.
They don't feel pain.
Are we gonna double down on this? Yeah,
I'll double down. You don't have to, so that way you can
plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability, but those things aren't of this earth.
They have no concept of pain. Now, believe it or not, Sacred Symbols is a PlayStation podcast, and we put it up every week. You can get the show 3 days early and ad-free by supporting Colin's Last Stand on Patreon at patreon.com/Colin's Last Stand. That also gets you perks from my other shows, including my eclectic interview series, Fireside Chats, my YouTube video game show, Side Quest, and my retro podcast, Knockback. And thousands of you support me over there and support us over there, and so we really very much appreciate that. It's essential if we're going to continue to do this show. And obviously, you get lots of cool perks for doing that as well. And if you listen on free feeds, please do subscribe on those free feeds, download our shows, and leave us nice reviews, and let everyone know about the might and the majesty and the wonder of Sacred Symbols.
By all means, please. It would help a ton.
It would help a ton, because our reviews are starting to slow down a little bit, so the algorithm on iTunes is starting to slow us down a little bit, starting to put us back into the teens and the 20s, and I don't like that. Mm-hmm. And I don't want that, and I won't accept that. So it's up to you guys to do something about it. Or not. I mean, don't do anything about it. It's really not up to you to do something about it. Mike Goodings wrote in and said, hey, Colin, more of a tech question. Is there a Patreon RSS link for just Sacred Symbols? Thanks so damn much for all the amazing content recently. I've missed your voice in the games world. Well, Mike, you have a common question that we get a lot on Patreon and that a lot of Patreon people get for their podcasts. If you join on Patreon, Colin's Last Stand, you get an RSS link on the front page that you can put into your iTunes or put into whatever module you want that will grab the podcast automatically. But since I put up so many shows every week, there is no way to segment those shows. So you're still going to get Fireside Chats, Knockback, and stuff. But I think that's all upside for you, if I do say so myself. Now, Chris, what happened to you this weekend at LAX? The world's greatest airport.
I almost don't want to talk about it.
All right, we can pass.
Long story short, I was supposed to fly to MythCon, Mythicist Milwaukee, which is like, I'm not even sure what it is. They invited me. Like, my friends Ps1 Head and Armored Skeptic and those guys were going to head over. And I was like, okay, I'll join you guys. And they got me a flight. I missed it. And I was like, oh, dang, I missed it. All right, whatever. I bought a new flight, got to the airport, got on the plane. I was on the plane. And I was like, okay, oh, man, I got a connecting flight 20 minutes after this plane lands. This better be a really smooth flight. And then over the loudspeaker, they're like, hey, the co-pilot went home. He has a cold. We're going to wait for a new one. I was like, okay, well, that can't take long. It's an airport.
Right.
Surely there is a co-pilot relatively nearby. Alas, no, it was delayed an hour. So I was like, okay, well, my connecting flight's screwed. So I went up and complained. Chaos ensued, and I had to I just went to LAX and spent my whole day at LAX only to go back home. So it was great. It was a great day.
That sucks.
No, I love it. LAX is great.
The hits never stop coming. So at LAX.
God.
I can't stand flying anymore. One of the reasons that I was so excited to work for myself was that I didn't have to travel anymore like I used to.
That was the first connecting flight I've ever taken, by the way. I specifically avoid. I was like, I don't want to risk missing a second flight ever. So that was the first connecting flight I ever had, and I missed it.
Where was it going? Denver?
It was going Denver.
Yeah.
And Denver to Milwaukee.
No one's going to Milwaukee direct.
Exactly.
So it's one of those places. Like, I've been to a few random places where, like Louisville, Kentucky, where it's like you aren't going to Louisville, Kentucky unless you go to Denver, you go to like Chicago or Atlanta or one of those places. Connecting flights are the worst. But you and I are coastal people, so we can usually avoid them. I feel bad for people that like live in one of those places where that's what
they
you have to do.
Yeah, no, that sounds awful.
That's the only option.
I would never go anywhere.
Yeah, me neither. I would ideally never go anywhere now. So Aaron and I went to San Diego for a few days last week. I interviewed a couple people that you guys will be able to hear on Fireside Chats, including David Jaffe and Pat Contry, who you guys might know from YouTube and from podcasts, a retro podcaster and retro YouTuber. And we were kind of down there, and even just going there, just driving a few hours was like kind of put me out of my element. Yeah. And when I came back to Santa Monica on Friday night, like Friday evening, I was like, oh, now I'm back in the same 10 square block place that I just never leave.
Yeah,
I'm perfectly
it's not
comfortable
fun
with
to
that.
just be in a box that's like flying through the air or just flying through just flying across roads and not being able to do anything when you know that you could just be doing things, making progress.
Thank God, though, for the advent of, well, it started with JetBlue, really, with TV in like the early 2000s, and then Wi-Fi. But then when I would travel overseas, Wi-Fi wouldn't work over the oceans, and now they've solved that problem. So at least you're like, as long as you're willing to pay for,
Yeah, and you got like
pretty terrible internet.
like the Switch too.
Yeah.
To help.
It could be worse. Like people in the 60s used to fly on way slower airplanes going all over the world with nothing to do. I'd even watch Mad Men, and when they're going back and forth from California and they're just sitting there like drinking and reading, and I'm like, no, the drinking part's
awful.
good. The last time I went to Philadelphia, I flew first class and I got way more drunk than I thought I was going to. Edwin S. Castillo wrote into us and said, "Is a hot dog a sandwich? We need Chris's take for historical purposes."
No, this is ridiculous. This is a ridiculous conversation. No, a hot dog is not a sandwich. One bread does not a sandwich make.
So if you cut the hot dog in slices and put it in between two pieces of bread, that's a sandwich. But in the roll, it wouldn't be
in
a
the
sandwich.
roll. It's not a sandwich.
I'm
It's like if you cut a pizza in half and like fold it. If you fold a pizza in half, is it a sandwich?
I'm more concerned about why people are so hung up on this question. Not only with this, but like you hear this with like our tacos or like other things. Like, are they in the sandwich family?
It's ridiculous.
And I'm like, I just feel like so we're taking like a carb and wrapping something else in it, and that's the sandwich, because then like a pierogi's a sandwich.
It's nonsense. It's just it's complete. Are dogs sandwiches? We might as well ask that because it's ridiculous. Who cares? It's a hot dog. Eat it.
Eat the hot dog. I didn't start liking hot dogs until I was an adult.
You gotta have them grilled. Then they're amazing. Like the hot dog water, like ones on the side of the road or in like Manhattan, they're fine.
Right.
But like a grilled hot dog is something else.
I just feel like I missed out on a lot as a child because I never, the street meat like we're talking about in New York or just going to barbecues. I was always a cheeseburger guy, and I like cheeseburgers a lot still to this day. They're like one of my favorite things. But I feel like I missed out on sheer decades of joy by like not having hot dogs more. They're great. They're great.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
You can go to a Jets game, pay, $18 for one if you want. Go Jets. Tony Colton wrote in and said, "Hey guys, just wanted to chime in with a bit of Media Molecule Dreams info. I got hands-on with the game 2 days ago at EGX in Birmingham, UK, and out of everything of the show at this event, this is the one game that really surprised me. The depth and range of types of games that can be built in Dreams is unbelievable, and the polish is there too. I can see this game being huge with streamers and wannabe game creators. One to watch for me. The reason I brought this up, Chris, is because I've gotten also a few messages because I think there was a preview round, maybe through EGX, where some outlets are writing about it, and people are really high on Dreams.
That's interesting. From what I saw when I was at PAX, when I got to actually see people playing it and see like different screens showing very, very different styles, I was like, wow, this is impressive. But the problem that I foresee is that I don't know how accessible something that varied is going to be. Like Little Big Planet had a little bit of that, but it was still kind of like janky when you would try to do stuff like you couldn't really make a good FPS in it, But Dreams looks like a very complicated game maker with the stuff that I've seen people do in it, and I just don't know how. I don't know how they're going to market it to like a wide audience to justify the amount of development time. That's what I foresee to be the problem.
I think you're probably right.
It looks awesome, honestly. It looks like really neat. I'm super interested to toy around with it because I used to toy around in like Unity and Unreal and all that. But
we'll see. I wanted to bring that up out of sheer curiosity, but also to be candid because I've been so down on that game that it seems like I'm in the minority and I've not played it. I have no interest in playing it. So maybe I'm wrong. The interesting thing that he brought up, though, is maybe streamers will help proliferate this game.
I could definitely see that
in the long run. We still don't have a release date. We still don't even have a beta. Remember, you were first promised a beta, I think, in 2015, if not 2016. So we'll see how that goes. And finally, Dave Funkhauser wrote into us and said, "I already know Colin's feelings about ice and drinks, so I need to know how Chris feels." Now, Chris, you and I have gone out to eat many times, and I don't know if you've noticed I get all my drinks with no ice in them.
Yeah.
Which makes me...
I've been meaning to do that for years, by the way, but I always forget, and I agree with you. I've just never had the confidence to be like, I don't want ice, because I feel like entitled almost. For some reason. I don't know why that is.
Hold the ice. Yeah, that's all you have to say.
Because you get less drink.
Exactly.
And it waters it down.
Exactly. You see, you understand me.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad I found you in this world. Because there's a few consequences that are strange about it. When you go out with other people and you ask for no ice, everyone else sometimes gets their drinks with no ice, and that bothers them. The straw also acts as a little bit of a buoy and kind of tries to get out of the drink when you don't have ice, which is a problem. But I don't see why a drink that's already cold needs to be colder. And when you're getting Coke out of a fountain or whatever, it's cold already.
Yeah.
So it's a little
and
confusing.
you're only going to be in this place for maybe an hour maximum. It's not like it's going to heat up to the point of... A drink is never at risk in that scenario of getting smoldering. You know, it's not like you're taking it in a car and going on like a 5-hour road trip in Arizona.
No, it's exactly right. And I do feel also that people forget. It's like what you said with the dilution. People are like forgetting, I think, that the ice isn't interfacing with the drink and keeping it cold. It's leaking the water into the Coke to make it cold. So you are getting a diluted product. I get McDonald's from Uber Eats all the time. There's no ice option.
Yeah.
So I have to scoop the ice out when they get it to me, which is a little annoying. And I already feel like the dilution process has taken place.
Yeah.
It frustrates me a little bit.
I think we're just neurotic.
You think? Yeah. Chris, what are you playing?
I got a little bit further in Destiny 2. I haven't had much time to really dive that far into it. I'm slowly kind of rekindling some joy in it, especially now that I have people to play with. It's definitely better. It's probably the best Destiny has ever been, but it's still like I'm always going to have that nagging feeling in my head of just like imagining what it could have been. That I think is just kind of going to doom this series for me.
Well, maybe we'll get it in Destiny 3 should that ever happen.
Yeah.
What you hope it will be. But
Yeah,
I'm not confident that we're going to get that game.
Probably not.
I've been playing Mega Man 11. I got you a copy of it too. Have you queued it up yet?
I downloaded it and immediately started writing because I didn't really have much time.
Fair enough. So I've beaten the game and I've been messing around with it a lot. I can't say too much about it right now, but I'll have a full video review up on, I think, October 2nd, I think is the embargo.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'll have more to say about it on episode 14 of Sacred Symbols, but stay tuned for that. Obviously, I'm one of the internet's biggest Mega Man fans by a mile. I think many of you know, so I know that a lot of you are especially intrigued by what I have to say about this. And obviously, what I have to say about it is going to be way more important than what anyone else has to say about it. I think we can take that one to the bank.
I'm really curious about what you think about it, to be honest.
We'll talk when we go to lunch after this.
Yeah.
Now, Chris, as I talked to you and I prefaced everything before we started recording, because we were going over the notes a little bit, this is just a crazy week for news. And not only by volume, there's a lot of news by volume, but substantial things happen. So I'm going to restructure this episode a little bit and we'll see what happens because I don't want the episodes to go much longer than 2 hours. A few of them have. I think by that point you start losing people. And I don't know what the point of going on for hours and hours at a time will be. I say that only because you had noticed and the listener will notice at the end that I don't really have many user questions for the end. Like usually we take a hodgepodge of random things we did not talk about. Rather, I integrated many of the reader, user, listener, whatever questions we're calling them, into the various news stories as I usually do. But these stories are so substantial that I feel like we're going to stay on them for a long time. So 2 things. First of all, I'm sorry that as usual that I'm not able to integrate more of your questions. I'm getting more and more questions every week. I thank you for that. We're doing our best to take the good ones and we'll try to include everyone as time goes on. The second thing is when we get to the end of the episode, we'll see if we even want to really delve into random kind of non sequitur questions or not, depending on how we're doing with time. So I wanted to throw that in there. And these are in order, I want to start with some good news first, and then we'll get into the bad news. And then we'll get back into some random news. So, number 1, Spider-Man on PlayStation 4 is officially setting sales records. USA Today reports that Insomniac's PS4 exclusive Spider-Man game sold 3.3 million copies in 3 days, grossing $198 million in that time, which, as noted by USA Today, is roughly $80 million more than Spider-Man Homecoming earned in its first weekend at the box office.
Whoa.
Which is incredible.
That's kind of wow.
It's an incredible stat. Sony confirmed that 1 million copies were pre-ordered. It's officially the fastest-selling first-party game in PlayStation's 24-year history, beating God of War from earlier this year, which previously held the mantle with 3.1 million copies sold.
That's nuts.
In 3 days. Before we get into some of the questions, how does this strike you? And did you end up platinuming Spider-Man? Because I know you said that was going to be your first platinum trophy.
Not yet. I will. It's definitely I'm so close at this point that I might as well. It's just a matter of time. I don't have that much time.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. Both of us really enjoyed it. If you guys missed it, we did a podcast all about Spider-Man that I think went up a week or 2 ago that you can listen to. It's very spoilery, so only listen to it if you don't care or if you've beaten the game or you're through it or just want our opinions. You can go check that out. And I did a video review for the game as well on SideQuest's YouTube channel, which you can check out as well. Nico Fargione wrote in and said, "Hey, Colin and Chris, your boy is a huge fan of open world superpower related games. I absolutely love the Prototype series, even going so far as to buy the DLC to support the developers, which ended up not working out. With Spider-Man being such a huge financial and critical success, do you think that the genre, superheroes and powers, is ready to explode in popularity and releases like first-person shooters did after Call of Duty? Thanks for the time and your content." How do you feel about this? Spider-Man is a massive thing. I'm seeing commercials during big football games and all that. Do you feel like this will influence others to follow suit?
No. And I think that specifically because Spider-Man is in a pretty unique place in the games industry because he's had a pretty long history of having pretty decent games. Like, there are bad Spider-Man games or Spider-Man games that aren't quite as good as Spider-Man 2 or Web of Shadows or like Ultimate Spider-Man, right? But even the worst Spider-Man game is better than the best Superman game. You know, I don't think you're going to see a lot of superhero-related games explode just because of this. I think this game exploded because it's Spider-Man and because it's been quite a while since we've had a very, very huge kind of well-received game in this particular franchise.
I think that part of the problem with his assumption is that it requires a marination and a working of with Sony and with its studio partners and also with a partner that owns the IP, because anyone, like you mentioned with Activision's Prototype, anyone can create their random superheroes. They, Sucker Punch and Sony did that with Infamous with, varying levels of success. But you need to identify the Superman or, the long rumored Justice League game, the long rumored Avengers game. I think those things are coming. I'm sure we haven't seen the last of Arkham in some way.
Oh, yeah.
So I think what's interesting about this space, Chris, to me, is in the AAA space that there's, obviously all these Spider-Man games that were A or below that we've played in the past. Some people liked them, some people didn't. But that this solidifies a licensed superhero in the AAA space for only really the second time in recent memory with Batman, and what Rocksteady did with Batman being the only other example of that. And, Radical Entertainment was the creators of Prototype, and I couldn't stand those games personally. But
really? Oh, I loved them.
I didn't understand the frenetic nature of them. And the problem is that for me is that they came out, and I think actually both of them, Prototype 1 and 2, came out around the same time that Infamous and then Infamous 2 came out. So there was these comparisons, these like touchstones that you can have about how a game should feel and should act in that spirit and how it doesn't. And I think that Prototype was underserved by being compared like that, whether for better or for worse, because I think they're very different games.
Yeah. Prototype is like a Doom kind of thing. Like you go to put on Prototype to like let some steam off. Like to just grab a person and throw him off the top of the Empire State Building because you're crazy. It's the closest probably we'll ever get to like a Carnage video game. Do you know who Carnage is?
Yeah, Carnage is the red-suited Spider-Man, right? Is he Spider-Man, though?
No. He's a serial killer who had the Venom symbiote. Or a part of the Venom symbiote. I'm such a dweeb about this garbage.
Venom and Carnage have to be together, right? Is that true? I heard that.
They don't necessarily have to be together. One has to exist for the other one to exist.
Oh,
but,
okay.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't a big fan of Prototype. I did Platinum Prototype 2 for some strange reason.
No, I didn't even like that one.
I don't know why
I
I
like
did
the
that.
first one.
But Radical Entertainment, those were the last games that Radical made. And Radical, as you might remember, was going to make a Crash Bandicoot game that got canceled. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Weird.
So interesting. So Prototype put them out of business.
They also made Hulk, I believe, Ultimate Destruction, which was also a ton of fun.
They did. They did make that game. Very well done. Jake Whitaker wrote in and said, "Hey, Colin and Chris, with the success of Spider-Man, do you think Marvel will get in bed with any other Sony first parties?" I'd be interested in this. I feel like there has to be something to be said, Chris, whether it's democratized and fair to other gamers or not, that Sony and its partner Insomniac treated this so well that you can't ignore their potential to do this again. And obviously, there's no doubt that Spider-Man 2 is going to come out of Insomniac. It will be a PlayStation exclusive, like I told you guys. But if I were them, I'd be like, well, do you guys have any other partners that you can kind of give this really nice AAA treatment to? Because we just made a ton of money and have a huge critical and commercial success on our hands. So why couldn't we do it for the X-Men? Why couldn't we do it for, whatever other property might be interesting to, gamers out there? Not that I don't know if X-Men is especially relevant, but
yeah, I think the answer is similar to the last one, where I just think Spider-Man is just such a unique character, not only in maneuverability, but just like from a gameplay standpoint, he's far more interesting than probably any other superhero that I can think of. Like even in Ultimate Spider-Man, when you were playing as Venom, I thought that was like super boring. He was just the Hulk pretty much. He just like running around. He's like this big dude jumping on. I don't foresee a huge, boom in superhero game. I know the Avengers game is coming out. I have no idea what that could possibly be. Maybe I'm thinking like an Ultimate Alliance type deal, but probably not.
Hopefully better than Ultimate Alliance. Not that there was anything wrong with that, but hopefully have a more higher production value. A AAA Arkham production.
That was it was a way different time.
Sure.
I like that one though.
Yeah, with Crystal Dynamics is, I think, the developer of this Avengers game, so we'll see.
Yeah. Have we seen anything about that at all?
With all the people I know in the industry, it's hard for me to know if like this was announced publicly or just a really open rumor or open, like they're just open secrets, like things that are in development, and this has been one of them. And there's been chatter of a Justice League game out of Rocksteady for a really long time. I don't know if that's true or not. I know that they are probably tired of working on Batman, and they have this great potential to do something cooler. But my problem with some of these superheroes being only tangentially kind of familiar with them, I'm not judging people for liking them or not, is like, how do you make a good Superman game, for instance, when Superman is so corny and so powerful and so can do anything? It doesn't. What are the stakes in a game like that?
Yeah, he can infinitely fly, which takes all the danger out of traversal. So like even traversing will only be fun for like a little bit.
It's very weird.
Yeah.
Anyone who could do a Spider-Man or a Superman game, give them credit, because I wouldn't know how to do it. And it seems like, to your point, no one has really figured out how to do it.
Yeah.
Number 2, let's stay with the good news for now. Sony has revealed the PlayStation Classic, an NES Classic-like device that will launch on December 3rd, cost $99.99, and come packing 20 preloaded games from the original PlayStation. PlayStation Classic is 45% smaller than the original PS1. It comes with 2 standard controllers, not DualShock controllers, an HDMI cord, and a USB cord. Interestingly, it doesn't come with an AC adapter, which is strange, though it can be obviously powered through the USB cord it comes with. For the time being, Sony has only released the names of 5 of the 20 titles that will come in the PlayStation Classic: Final Fantasy VII, Jumping Flash, Ridge Racer Type 4, Tekken 3, and Wild Arms, one of my favorite games. Obviously, they'll be teasing more games as we get closer to launch. Sony confirmed to IGN that PlayStation Classic will not be updated once released, meaning that the games it comes with are the games it will have. Sony also confirmed that the original PS1 peripherals, such as controllers and memory cards, will not work with the PlayStation Classic, which is created to work strictly with the controllers it comes with. And this was a weird hang-up for a lot of people, because I think a lot of fans, a lot of PlayStation fans, newer PlayStation fans, younger PlayStation fans, don't remember that the original PS1 controller until 1998 or 1999 had no sticks on it at all. And that's the controller we're getting. That's the controller type we're getting.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. I had them.
So, yeah, I got mine for, I think, Metal Gear Solid, and Ape Escape obviously was the first game that was mandatory to have those controllers. But some people, it's funny, like, I was reading some stuff and I'm like, some people really were young or weren't around them because those were the controllers. I think some people were.
Were some people like completely oblivious to the? Oh, that's interesting.
Even on PlayStation.
Because I'm a little hung up on it, even though I'm very aware of what the original PS1 controllers were. Just because one of my favorite games of all time, Ape Escape, just can't be on it, and I can't play it on the PS4. So help, please. Like I don't know. Can I please have Ape Escape, or just backwards compatibility would be nice. Also, maybe. I don't know. Help.
Yeah, help this man.
Help me.
Won't you help this man?
I'm bleeding on the side of the road, and the only thing that'll help me is Ape Escape.
How does this strike you as at first blush? Because I saw it, I'm like, I'm not hugely surprised by it. I have no real interest in it. I think it's a little overpriced.
Oh, yeah.
But it's cool to expose these games to, I guess, other generations or people that are eager to play them. It just doesn't have the same heft and gravity as like a Nintendo product doing the same thing.
You know how you expose newer generations to older games? You make them playable on the latest machines that everybody has. That's how you do it. You don't sell a separate machine for far more money than it's probably worth to then coax them into possibly trying it. This is purely a nostalgia thing, let's be real. Like, I'm kind of interested in it, only purely because I have such a fond connection to the PS1, and I just like the look of it, and it's like, I have another TV, like kind of like a small side TV that it could go with, and that's fine. I might be suckered into getting it because I'm a dumb consumer, but at the same time, I can't help but wonder, like, why, if you can clearly get these games running at a resolution that's suitable for an HDMI, you can clearly get these games running on modern hardware that's not an original PS1, so why not just put these games on the PS4 marketplace?
That's what everyone's been saying. And let's jump into these questions because we had so many questions, because I'm in agreement with you on that. And it's obviously a play for nostalgia, and so are many games. I mean, to be fair, the Crash collection is a play on nostalgia. The upcoming Spyro collection is another play on that. Mega Man 11 is a play on nostalgia.
But those collections' existence alone undermine this whole endeavor with this classic console, because Crash is not going to be on it, because why would it?
Yeah.
Spyro's not going to be on it, because why would it?
Yeah, that would be weird. It is weird. Final Fantasy VII's inclusion I thought was kind of weird because
it's now on everything.
Yeah. Like Jumping Flash, for instance, is an interesting inclusion, or Ridge Racer or something like that. Games that are either available PS1 classics on PS3 or Vita, or games that are kind of a little lesser known. But if you start kind of proliferating these games too much, then it does kind of undermine the value of any specific platform that you might buy into. But I think they missed a huge opportunity here to make it more modular, which I think would have made it way different than NES and SNES Classic. But anyway, let's get into some of these questions. Corey Savas wrote in, and said the PlayStation Classic was announced earlier this week. 4 games have been announced so far with 16 more to come. I think 5 games have been announced. What would you and Chris like to see on the console? We were just talking about this. Are there any specific games that you want to see on the console? Because I think PS1's library is so vast, so much bigger than SNES's or NES's, that there's way more to choose from. And I don't know how you balance genres and how you balance relevance and how you get your publishing partners to buy in on this. You know, the interesting thing about the games that were announced, I mean, I'll go back up to them and read them again, is that Sony either has a relationship with these studios or there's a direct lineage with the game in relation to the PS1 and the way we think about it. So Jumping Flash, for instance, is a Sony-owned IP. So it's obvious that it would be on there. And Ridge Racer, it was such a huge, that's a Namco game, but that was such a huge part of the PS1's identity. So that makes sense. Wild Arms is published by Sony and developed by Sony. Well, developed by Media Vision, technically. So we have to look at it through those lenses, I think, of like games that make sense like that. They're not going to be able to grab, I think, some of the games people really want. But what games do you think make sense that you think would be put onto the PS1 Classic? And obviously, they're not talking about it because they want to tease this out.
The problem with me is that like I'm thinking about all the games that I'd want to see on this thing, and I can't help but separate it from just put it on the PS4. You know, it's just like I get into like a loop of just like frustration of like, why can't I just play these things? I would love to see. I guess you don't need the analog sticks for Crash Team Racing, and that's not a remaster that they've done. It's not on Xbox or PS4 or Switch or anything, so that could be cool. Maybe Legacy of Kain. That's one that I think was pretty big, and we haven't seen it remastered at all. It's not on PC even.
Yeah, there's some random ones, like Pandemonium can be on there. Like, there's like really random grabs that you can make. I think if you can get Konami on board, which is possible, I think you can probably easily get Metal Gear Solid and Symphony of the Night, which would be 2 huge inclusions on it. Some people are talking about how the ESRB ratings are going to be relevant, that you don't want this thing to be rated M overall because that might put people off. But even talking to Capcom about getting some Street Fighter games, Street Fighter Alpha 3, for instance, or Resident Evil Director's Cut, I just feel like the problem with this particular console, and I think you're going to see a similar problem with the inevitable N64 Classic, is this generation of games, the 1995/1996 to 2000 generation of polygonal jumping into 3D spaces, these games don't hold up. And I'm not saying from a gameplay perspective, because a lot of them do, but from a graphical perspective,
they need to be overhauled.
Yeah, and they're not going to be, because these are going to be ports. So I think you have to be mindful of that too. So including some games would be, I think, to the detriment of the console. Like Metal Gear Solid, for as phenomenal as it is, I think the Twin Snakes GameCube remake from 2004 is superior. And are you highlighting an inferior version of the game? And the same thing with Resident Evil, when it's been remade now twice and it's available on PS4 in the remade GameCube version of it, remade from there. So I think that's going to be the really interesting needle that they're going to have to thread, is how do you make this thing look good while not reminding people about indeed how bad some of these games have held up. And that's going to be an interesting balancing act, I think.
I've said for a long time that like that generation of games is probably the one that's most deserving of the kind of HD remaster treatment out of anything. I think I'd like to see maybe Wipeout. The last Wipeout game I played was on PSP, and I loved it. It was Wipeout Pure. It was awesome. I missed the PSP.
Yeah, and that studio obviously defunct now as well. Liverpool. Alexander Dean wrote in and said, "Hello again, good sirs. With the vast library that could go into the PlayStation Classic, its games could seemingly be decided by lawyers. Is this why we've only had 5 announced? Could the team still be working on acquiring the rights to games such as Metal Gear and Tony Hawk, sitting on first-party titles should they come up short? Thanks, guys. Keep up the inspiring work." I don't know how you feel about this, Chris, but I would find it impossible to believe that the roster of games are not set already and have been for a long time. There's no way that they would announce this and announce the release date then still be working in late September on acquiring games. I think that's almost
all
impossible.
These ports would have had to be done already. They're just withholding for showmanship, I think.
Yeah, it's weird because they are not going to garner the pre-orders that they could if they let loose the entire catalog of games, but then they're not going to keep people interested long enough. I don't know that this is going to be as big as people think it is going to be, but I could be wrong. I mean, people look at this console. I mean, the PS1 is a great console. I loved it, but do they have this auxiliary list of first-party games? There's already several first-party games announced for it. It shouldn't be a first-party machine. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they worked with Konami. They worked with Capcom and a few other partners. Tony Hawk's a great, work with.
Is Tony Hawk even possible without the analog sticks? I can't remember.
Let me think here.
I feel like maybe it is.
I think it came out in
I think it is.
I think it came out in 99, so I think it...
But ideally, you'd want Pro Skater 2 in there.
Yeah.
You'd want Pro Skater 2 or maybe 3.
It's true that leaving out the DualShock, the original DualShock mode, does limit it a little bit with late generation PS1 games.
Yeah, like Ape Escape.
But I will be interested to see how it all shakes out. But no, I don't think that lawyers have... Well, lawyers, of course, have a great deal to do with this, but I don't think lawyers are the ones kind of still mulling through and everything.
Yeah. This would have been done ages ago, the lawyer business.
My assumption is that the unit is complete. They might have already started manufacturing them, and you can probably play everything on it right now if you were in Sony's HQ. Carlos Strife wrote in and said, "Hi, Colin and Chris. I'm loving this show and look forward to it every single week. Thank you so much. My question is about the PlayStation Classic. Do you think it was a bad choice to bundle it without the DualShock? That makes me think that classics like Ape Escape won't be around among the 20 selected games that come in the package." We already talked about that, Carlos, but the stinger on your question is what I really want to get into. Also, do you think a PS2 Classic could happen too? My assumption is that this has to rely on how the original PlayStation Classic does, but this gets even further into your frustration about why these games aren't just natively playable on PlayStation Network right now.
I don't think you're going to see a PS2 Classic because there are already some PS2 games that you can play on PS4, if I'm not mistaken. There's like a handful.
Yeah, oh yeah, there are. There's more than... a handful is fair, but yeah, there are quite a few PS2 games. Mostly first party, Dark Cloud, Wild Arms 3, etc.
Yeah, so I feel like because we know it's possible, like Nintendo's gotten away with this for a while, specifically because Nintendo's just kind of this... They can do whatever they want, really. And as long as it's not another Wii U, they'll be fine. I would be shocked and kind of annoyed to see a PS2 Classic because I just don't think it's far back enough to justify that kind of thing.
The PS2 is not even 20 years old, so it's not classic yet in my mind. I don't even really consider the PS1 retro, although I guess it is technically a retro console. But I think that they have to wait and see. I think they'd be foolish not to do it if they saw this amazing demand for this unit that they're doing now. But I just don't know that beyond people that don't own PS4s or remember this console or more casual gamers, this is aimed at them. And I also want to remind people that even though NES Classic and to a lesser extent SNES Classic sold very well, that there was a supply limitation to it that I think made it seem cooler and made it seem rarer than it was, which is Nintendo's specialty going back many decades. So this is not the way Sony plays. I wouldn't be surprised if they manufactured plenty for everyone to buy for PlayStation Classic. We just have to see how this shakes out. But again, I'm not wildly convinced that this thing's going to be this major system seller. Although it is interesting, Chris, that with Spider-Man out now, there is no AAA game in the fall exclusively to PlayStation. So this product is kind of like their big exclusive push, as it were.
Yeah.
In a way.
I hadn't thought about it in that way.
Like they have no November game, no October game. So we'll see. Josh James says, "Colin, Chris, good day, gentlemen. How do you feel about the direct copying that Sony has been accused of, rightly so, over the years of Nintendo, i.e. Rumble Pack, analog sticks, motion controls, and now the classic console? I'd like to think they typically improve on Nintendo's ideas, but sometimes not so much. I'm looking at you, PlayStation Move controllers. Thank you for the show." How do you feel about this? This bothers me, Chris, for one specific reason. The NES Classic was not a Nintendo idea.
Yeah,
I had an
Sega.
Atari. Yeah, well, Sega did it, and I had an Atari 2600 in college that was packed with literally every Atari game. People acting like that Nintendo invented this idea, you're completely. It's totally an ignorant stance.
It's totally, it's entirely false. You can consider the Atari thing like far back enough that it's like, okay, that's its own thing. But even when you start to go into the idea of selling a retro style console full of natively running games that don't need to be exchanged in cartridge form or disc form or anything like that, Sega's been doing that for a while. They just haven't been advertising it particularly. I remember seeing a Genesis, like a new Genesis.
Yeah, it's like Flashback or whatever.
Yeah, it's something like that. It's like a Genesis on a shelf somewhere with like 50 games built into it or something. And I was like, oh, what? I didn't hear about this, because they don't push that kind of thing, because I guess they probably just didn't have all that much faith in it to push it at all. Nintendo's really good at this kind of thing, at marketing this thing that's kind of seemingly lame and just kind of putting it out into the world under this really big spotlight of, look at this. It's an NES and it's small and you can play all sorts of shit on it. Sign me up. Sega just couldn't do it, I guess. But it's not a Nintendo idea.
Yeah, that's the one hang up I have with people being mad about this, is like, be mad about it for any number of reasons, but if you're mad that Sony copied Nintendo, then that's just ignorant. I had River Rage on a 2600 so far up my ass in college off of one of those Ataris, those catch-all Ataris, that, I was literally in 2003. So
yeah, and even if you want to get even deeper into the weeds, I remember even on PS1, on the original PS1, you had stuff like Namco Museum, which was just
Right,
all
compilation
these
discs.
compilation discs. Or it's not a new thing.
The last Dreamcast game I bought in 2001 was called Smash Pack, and it was a ton of Genesis games. So, yeah, obviously compilations aren't anything new, and obviously even hardware compilations aren't new. To his other point, yeah, Nintendo has pioneered Rumble and all of these other kinds of things that, even the D-pad. And these are ideas that have been garnered and acquired by its competitors, and I think everyone's best for it. And I don't think that's a uniquely Nintendo thing. Nintendo wasn't first to optical media. Nintendo wasn't the first to online infrastructure. Nintendo wasn't the first to a lot of things that it's doing now. So I don't quite see it that way. They weren't the first to put two proper analog sticks in their controller, which was a huge revolution.
Yeah.
4 triggers on the controller, another huge revolution. So, and I've said this before, and we've talked about this a great deal. Nintendo has this mysticism and this mystique in the industry where scores get, I think, a little bit inflated. Its respect gets a little bit inflated. The things that it's done has gotten a little bit inflated. No one denies with their right mind that Nintendo isn't at the very nexus of why video games happened, why video games work, why video games were revived in the 80s. No one denies that. But that Nintendo gets credit for literally everything is a little absurd at this point.
Yeah. And also just these companies learn from each other all the time. It's a shared ecosystem, and ideas sometimes get innovated on and improved, and that's just part of it. I will say that probably the PS1 Classic probably wouldn't exist had Nintendo not pushed for the NES or the SNES, because obviously they learned that there was a market there, but it's not a new thing.
And I just feel like when things go the other direction, like I've said, I don't feel like anyone's has anything to say. Yeah, Nintendo's never borrowed anything from PlayStation. Yeah, never. Antonio Pereira says, "Hey, Colin and Chris. With the PlayStation Classic being announced, I can't help but feel like the system is kind of pointless. Maybe it's because I don't have much of a connection with the original PlayStation, but to your point, Chris, I'd much rather play these older games on my PS4 than buying an old $100 system to play a handful of games." I want to focus on that particular point about price.
It is expensive.
It seems twice as expensive as it should be, I would even say, because pound for pound, you can get 20 games on PlayStation 3 or PlayStation Vita, PS1 Classics for $100. So now the price seems to be a little bit more nebulous because you're paying a little bit for the hardware, you're paying for the convenience, you get these two controllers, it's kind of a social thing, whatever the case might be. But I still feel like $49.99, $59.99, $69.99, a much more appropriate and enticing kind of grab, especially if many of the games are first party, and therefore Sony has no licensing fees to pay out necessarily. So you're just proliferating these console units. So you agree, we're in agreement that $100 seems steep.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's insane.
That's what's stopping me from pre-ordering it. I think we'll probably get ours from Sony anyway, but that's what's stopping me from going and being like, oh, just out of curiosity, I probably should be familiar with this thing.
Yeah.
And we could afford it, but you don't buy things just because you can afford it. I want to pay what I think something's worth. And I just don't see the value in this thing. My SNES Classic and my NES Classic were basically $100 combined almost, a little bit more than that. It's like,
yeah,
they're both going to be better.
And they both have more games on it, don't they?
They do. And I think I don't want to say they're going to have better games, but that's not necessarily going to be true. And I was a little disappointed with SNES Classic in comparison to NES Classic, but there's a lot of value in those units. I mean, I love those fucking things. So I think the price is not right. The price is not right. Eric Clyde wrote in. It said, "Do you think Final Fantasy VII being announced for the Switch and Xbox One takes a little steam out of the announcement? That would have been a marquee exclusive game for the system. Now it's arguably the worst place to play it."
I think a lot of recent developments take a lot of steam out of this thing, because we know Medieval's not going to be on it because Medieval has a remaster supposedly coming out. We know that Crash isn't going to be on it because there's a remaster. We know that Spyro's not going to be on it because there's a remaster. We know that Ape Escape's not going to be on it because there's no analog sticks. So there's a lot of things that probably would have been very exciting that are just kind of obviously not going to happen. So yeah, no, it's entirely steamless, in my opinion.
It is funny that Final Fantasy VII was announced for all these other consoles. I did feel a little weird about it. Like, not that
it's on PC.
Yeah, it's been on PC since the late 90s. And what we have on PS4 is a port of the PC version of the game.
Yeah.
With like the little enhancements, like the speed enhancements and stuff like that. But I don't mind that that Final Fantasy VII is going to Nintendo Switch and is going to Xbox One, but it is weird. Like when I read that whole announcement where they're bringing all of these games over, I think they're bringing like maybe Final Fantasy 12, Final Fantasy 9, whatever the case may be. I'm like, wow, this is really weird because these games were always just inherently native to PlayStation. Like they just never really went anywhere else. And so seeing Final Fantasy VII on Xbox One, a little peculiar.
I mean, Final Fantasy started on Nintendo first off.
Sure.
So Final Fantasy's always been this kind of weird like ebb and flow kind of game where it's like, oh, this one's only on phones, and it's like, what? It's a weird franchise.
I'm surprised we never got our Xbox Final Fantasy because that would have been fucking icing on the cake.
Yeah.
Daniel Pineda wants to talk a little bit about PlayStation 2 Classic. We already kind of talked about how we didn't think that this was going to happen, but he says, what 20 must-have games would you have in it if it was announced? That's a pretty enticing thing because PS2 has a pretty robust catalog of games. But to your point, a lot of the games that I would put on there are already playable on PlayStation 4 or conceivably could be because, for instance, like who would not put a Grand Theft Auto game on there? Who wouldn't put all 3 Grand Theft Auto games on there? Well, they're all playable on PS4. Who wouldn't put a game like Wild Arms 3 or now Onimusha's coming out and we would put that on there? Yeah. Final Fantasy X playable on PS4. There's, a ton of products that have that overlap. And I think to your point, I think you're exactly right, Chris. It just makes it more extreme and more frustrating if that were to happen.
PS3 Classic.
Yeah.
How frustrating would that be? Oh my God.
Make me want to kill a man. Aaron Anderson says, hey guys, so I pre-ordered the PS1 Classic not knowing 75% of the games, and I feel like I wasted my money by doing so. I feel most of the games on the PS1 can be played somewhere else or are already remastered at this point, so the PS1 has very little games that I feel like I cannot play in other places that the PS1 should have. Personally, I want to see games that are hard to find on it that I love. Mega Man Legends 1 and 2, Chrono Cross, Brave Fencer Musashi, Twisted Metal. But he says, but the fact that we have zero idea of what these next 15 games are could mean Sony has some really bad choices for us. What do you guys think Sony will do with the rest of the catalog? And have they screwed me over knowing that I can play Final Fantasy VII and some of the other greats on other platforms? The part of this that I wanted to focus on, Chris, of Aaron's question, is the idea of PS1 Classic, and we know it's not going to be this, but the idea of a PS1 Classic that is literally just rare games. Mm-hmm. So games that you can't find, games that are not necessarily playable or available anywhere easily, that could have been a really fascinating thing for them to do.
Yeah, but it also would have far less draw, I feel like, because the whole reason you go for a nostalgia console is to play games that you remember or that the majority of people can remember. Like,
and who doesn't remember Brave Fencer Musashi?
I feel like that's a catch-22 kind of situation, Like, you could end up putting this thing out full of rare games, like 20 rare games that can't be found anymore, and that'll fulfill a niche, but I would foresee it being even less of a hit than the Classic is already going to be, and I don't even foresee that being particularly a huge thing, Well,
you're absolutely right. From an interest in marketing standpoint, that would only appeal to a hardcore audience, and I think it exacerbates your point from before even more. Like, if you want to play Mega Man Legends, for instance, like, why isn't it just playable on PS4?
And also, all these rare games, if you ported them over to this console, just put them on the PS4. I can't get this out of my head.
You're absolutely right.
Am I crazy? Am I insane for, like, harping on this?
No, I think you're actually changing my mind on it a little bit. Marty Blois wrote in and said, will you actually play games on the PS Classic if they don't have trophy support? This is a big conundrum for me because...
Yeah, because you're crazy.
Well, for a myriad of reasons. And this only being one of them. PS Classic is not going to have PlayStation trophy support. It would have been cool to be able to log in with your PSN on it and do stuff like that, but it's not going to stop me necessarily. If there are games on there that I want to play, I'll play them. But that's not really...
If anything, it gives you license to put a game down if it's not, exactly. if it's not holding your attention.
Exactly. And it reminds me that I didn't put it in the news because I don't really believe it, but rumor broke last night from Tidix, who's kind of a well-known, I talk to him sometimes, always been really nice to me, but a well-known kind of industry insider, who tweeted out yesterday that PSN name changes are really close now, and that the solution that Sony has come up with is that you basically have to abandon your PS3 shit, like your games, your downloads, your trophies, and I don't believe that that's the solution. That's not in line with the things that I've heard over the years. But it goes to show you that this trophy stuff's still very relevant to people. And I was going over my trophies last night, and I was like, if I changed my name, what would I lose? And I would lose like half of my trophies. Ugh. And I'm like, but does it really matter? Does it really matter?
Well, you have a lot of them, so I assume it matters at least in some, quite a bit to you.
Because it's funny, man. I have, I think, 71 platinum trophies and, 6,000 or 7,000 trophies, whatever the case might be. And the funny thing is that I would love to go back and delete a bunch of shit, like one-off things, like including platinums, like where I'm like, I don't want this in my collection. And I understand why they don't do that, because someone could just log into your account, like hack your account and just delete all your trophies, and that would send people to fucking suicide, like me. Mm-hmm. So I understand why they don't do that. But yeah, so anyway, I wanted, that's a non sequitur.
Cool if you could just hide them.
You are allowed to hide them so people can't see them. But
I mean, like hide one-offs. Like if you want to like maybe like take this game, it's like I didn't like that. I don't want that on my collection. Just kind of like, Kind of like how Facebook does it, like only friends can see this. And
Right,
like,
right.
You know what I mean? Only me.
There is an option. I think it came with Vita to be able to hide trophies from the list that people see on PSN. But the people that have, I guess, connections to the back end that, like PSN profiles and PlayStationTrophies.org and stuff, they still garner all the trophies, and it annoys the shit out of me. So there's no solution. There's no good solution, is what I'm saying. Azan wrote in and said, "Hey, Colin and Chris, in relation to the announcement of PlayStation Classic, do you think that Sony should have invested/focused more on PlayStation TV, making it more robust and durable instead of following the footsteps of their competition? After all, maintaining the PS TV library of games from PSX, PSP to Vita is a better investment than shoving 20 PSX games in one tiny, cute console. Love the show. Keep up the podcasts coming." We will, Azan. Do you remember the PlayStation TV? Do you remember this thing?
I remember it vaguely. I still have no idea what it is.
It's basically it's the size of a deck of cards, and it's a PlayStation Vita that you can hook into your TV. And they called it the PlayStation TV, and it had like some games that were able to be played on a DualShock controller and all this kind of stuff. It basically came and went. No one cared about it. I didn't even own one. So, Azan, I hear what you're saying, but I think that focusing on hardware that was just DOA, that literally probably sold in the thousands at the most, I don't think that would have been a wise idea. And the PlayStation TV was an interesting idea because it played Vita games, it played PSP games, it played PS1 classics. So there's something to be said about making it more robust and basically making this little unit that's affordable for people that they can then buy for a cheap price and then have interaction with the PSN. But I just don't think I don't see that happening. Interesting question though. If you hear a weird cut there, it's because I had to go poop. But we're ready to go on to the next piece of news.
Let's do it.
Number 3. And now we're getting into sadder territory. I wanted to start with some uplifting stories, but now we're getting into sadder territory. Sony has revealed that it's officially halting the production of PS Vita handhelds beginning in 2019. Website Gamatsu relays word from the Japanese gaming magazine Famitsu, in which Sony's Hiroyuki Oda says, quote, "In Japan, we will manufacture the PlayStation Vita until 2019. From there, shipping will end," end quote. As far as the successor handheld, he said, quote, "Currently, we do not have any plans regarding a new handheld device," end quote. Vita launched in Japan in 2011, and Japan was its most reliably successful market by far. That it's being discontinued there, alongside word that the manufacture of physical Vita games will end in 2019, basically spells the end of the handheld in the near future.
How do you feel?
It's terrible news.
Yeah.
I really feel like Vita was too good for this world and too special for it. And it's really frustrating that people didn't understand, and I'm not saying now in 2018, but back in 2012, 2013, that people didn't really understand how amazing this device was and that it really deserved more of our support. And there are some games on it that are phenomenal, including games that it's remarkable run on a handheld like that at the time. Like Killzone Mercenary is a great example of a game that's awesome on the console, that they got Borderlands 2 running on it from stem to stern is an amazing feat, so I get a little annoyed because it makes me sad that like it's gone, like it's like with a whimper. But the cool thing is that there's a huge group of people that just would not let it die, just wouldn't let it die. And I'm one of them. I'm probably partially responsible for it. How do you feel about it?
I never had one. So I just feel like, oh, dang. I might pick one up now.
Well, now's the time. If you guys want one,
Yeah.
I mean, people have been asking me this. If you want one, I'd pick one up. I'm probably going to buy a couple myself just to have. I already have two, but I'll probably buy a couple just to keep one in the box and maybe have another one in case mine dies or whatever, just to be safe. You can get it for $160, $170, I think.
Yeah, they're pretty cheap now.
So, RIP Vita. We got some questions. Tyler Franklin says, with Sony confirming the end of Vita's life cycle and no plans for a successor, do you see this as a good or bad move going forward? I'm a little puzzled by it. I don't know that I necessarily believe them, first of all, but I feel like playing in the handheld space, especially with the renaissance of Nintendo is experiencing with the Switch, it would make sense for them to explore that. I don't know if that's the space they want to be in. I don't know that they really rely a lot on power and forward-thinking technology, and so making a handheld that's powerful is going to be really expensive and probably put a lot of people off, but I think it's worth exploring.
No, absolutely, yeah. Especially because without the handheld space, or without PlayStation like foraying into the handheld space again, they're kind of locking themselves in, because Microsoft's been doing a pretty good job of like exploring the console space, but also exploring like the PC space. They have this kind of, extra hand in the PC ecosystem, and I think it's smart to have a hand somewhere. Nintendo obviously has home consoles and a huge success in handheld. And Sony now, I guess, is just console. They have no real hand in PC. They have no hand, I guess, now in handheld. So it's a bit like putting all your eggs in one basket. It's a pretty safe basket. PlayStation's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
But it's also, I think you're missing a huge opportunity to innovate and do some cool stuff.
I just think this notion that people don't want dedicated gaming handhelds, was wrong. And I think that people thought that Vita was proving that case a little bit. And people forget that 3DS, when it launched, was bombing. 3DS bombed when it came out. A lot of people forget that thing looked like it was dead. And, it wasn't until that fall and winter of 2011 where it really started to turn things around. It had this this terrible launch library, and it was just weird to cede to your competitor a space without making them play a little bit, making them play defense, even if it's not something that's worthwhile. And people forget that even though Vita was, I guess, a commercial failure by all accounts, or most accounts, PSP wasn't, and PSP sold 82 million units, which is a huge rousing success. And so Sony is 1 for 2 in that space, and I really feel like they should take another crack at it. And I would love them to do that, but I don't think they're going to.
Yeah, no, I would love all of them to take a crack at it, to be honest. I would love to play Gears of War on a train. Come on. What? Let me do that. It's weird that they would just kind of admit defeat like that. I don't think... I really doubt that this is the last you'll see from PlayStation as far as handhelds go. Maybe not for a while. You'll probably hear something about something that they're working on in the handheld space, probably in the middle of PS5's life cycle, I would imagine. I don't think they would turn it down. Especially seeing how far the ecosystem is going to change in response to the Switch. I think that's the interesting part. Like the wrench the Switch plays into all this.
For sure. I think that there's an argument to be made that making a handheld that is dedicated to the hardware that you're making, like the console home hardware that you're making, could limit the entire thing. And that's what you're seeing with Nintendo, where they just have this very limited ecosystem that's just going to be further exposed the further we go along, because it's just not powerful enough. And Sony making a handheld that maybe can play nice with PS5, maybe plays PS4 games, and has a very similar functionality, like remote play functionality, as PS Vita does right now with PS4, could be really tantalizing and interesting. Mm-hmm. They do play around in the VR space, which the other two competitors aren't, which is interesting. Like, they each have their hand in this different kind of hypothetical space. But
yeah, well, Microsoft does play a little bit. They're doing more like HoloLens type augmented reality stuff. Microsoft has hands everywhere, first off, because they're Microsoft, and right. Something that they've made is in everything that you own. They're pretty well established, but no, yeah, I do see your point. They are at least doing VR, which is interesting. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think it's a smart place to play. Mm-hmm. I just think with a company with leverage and making some money, making wise investments is interesting, but it is a years-long commitment. When you commit to doing something like this, you have to commit to it. And I think that was the part with Vita that is lost, is that I don't think that they were fully committed to it from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And so I think that hurt. They wouldn't pivot on memory cards. They wouldn't, put enough first-party resources into games. And when you do stuff like that and you commit to it, you get great products. You get Freedom Wars, and you get Killzone Mercenary, and you get all these great games. And there was a lot of good stuff on Vita, and it's sad to see it die, but it had to happen. Toddy wrote in and said, "The Vita is dead. Long live the Vita. Sony has announced that the plug is being pulled only years after suffocating our favorite side piece. However, the afterlife of PS Vita looks long and fulfilling after the recent exploit, which allows the Vita to be hacked to enjoy emulation of retro consoles, homebrew ports, and our huge range of PS1 classics. Thoughts, comments, and concerns? Proud to be a patron." Thank you so much for being a patron, Toddy. This is why PSP lasted so long and lived so long. And Sony has been way more keen on constantly updating the firmware on Vita. I'm surprised by how often I have to update the Vita, because people keep getting around it in order to do cool things on it. And there are a few Vitas in stasis with old updates that are completely broken. And so I think that there could be a long life for it. And that could be why Sony's interested in killing the manufacturer of the hardware, because they didn't kill the manufacturer of the PSP until, I think, 2013 or 2014. So that was being manufactured for the better part of a decade. And this is going to be a little bit different. But yeah, more power to you. Do whatever you want to do with your Vita. Extract value out of it.
Yeah. And also that convinced me even more that I want to pick one up.
Number 4. Massive layoffs have hit developer Telltale Games. Telltale once employed around 250 people. Only 25 of them currently remain, finishing off some projects before the entire studio is shuttered. The surprising news comes by way of multiple sources who have reported various assumed facts, including that everything Telltale is working on or has announced is effectively canceled. That includes the second season of The Wolf Among Us, the second season of Game of Thrones, and the recently announced Stranger Things project. The small staff temporarily left behind will apparently be responsible for finishing Minecraft-related content for Netflix before the studio shutters entirely. It's also been reported that unreleased episodes in the long-awaited final season of The Walking Dead will never see the light of day. So, to stop here for a minute, it appears that the last season of The Walking Dead was 5 episodes and only 2 of them will be released, which is weird. I find that strange. Telltale Games was founded in 2004 by ex-LucasArts employees keen on making Lucas-style adventure games using famous IP. Sam & Max, which began in 2006, was its first well-known franchise, with Back to the Future and Jurassic Park also preempting its rise to critical and commercial success with The Walking Dead, the first season of which launched in 2012. Episodic adventure games from The Wolf Among Us, Tales from the Borderlands, Game of Thrones, Batman, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Minecraft followed. How does this news strike you? Telltale Games,
I think
no
they
more.
flew too close to the sun on the wings of IP, is what it feels like.
Keep in mind, I'm ignorant on this. I have no idea. I don't know anybody at Telltale. I don't know the ins and outs of their business model, but like, someone had to have been really bad with money for this to happen, I feel like. I almost don't see a way around it.
You hear, and I've heard over the years a lot of bad things about working at Telltale. And, it goes without saying that first we wish those affected the very best because
of course.
This layoff apparently happened out of nowhere. These people will receive no severance. Their health insurance is being cut off at the end of the month. So this is something that either snuck up on Telltale out of nowhere, which I find hard to believe, or they really misled people and were really hoping for the next check to come in the mail so they can keep things going and so on and so forth. Someone shared with me, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, but someone shared with me sales data, I think garnered from Steam, about how little interest is actually there in their games and how they were releasing way too many games at way too fast a clip with way too big of a team size, considering that the only massive commercial success they ever experienced was season 1 of The Walking Dead. And if you look at the stats that were provided to me, it's been all precipitously downhill from there, including with Game of Thrones, including with Borderlands, and all those kinds of things. A lot of people were tweeting at me when this happened saying, Colin was right. And the reason that they were saying that was because I had long been predicting the demise of Telltale. I didn't think it was going to happen like this, but I kept saying, and I think people were reading into it differently, that they need to make different games and stuff like, no, they make adventure games and that's fine. That's what they do. But they never invested in an engine. They never invested in technology that makes them reliable. I remember when Game of Thrones came out, it was erasing people's saves. This is not an acceptable thing. And I just think Telltale got an earned reputation for just not giving a shit about the technical fidelity of their games. And that kind of stuff catches up with you. And I'm sorry that it affected people, and obviously you don't want to see anyone lose their jobs, but the people that mismanaged that company deserve all of the blame because they had something really special. And if they just slowed down, remained small and nimble, didn't take every little thing that was thrown their way to just make, money here and there, then they could have created, just a few games maybe. Maybe they just focused on The Walking Dead and maybe just one other thing, and they made something truly special, something that worked, something that evolved and was robust, but they didn't do that. And so this was the inevitable end result.
They juggled way too many things at once. Like I remember I would hear, it felt like I was hearing about a new Telltale project every other month. And I was like, Guardians of the Galaxy? I forgot about that entirely. Like that was even a thing that they planned. Like what?
Cole Bullis wrote into us. We have a lot of questions about this.
Yeah.
He said, I think most Sacred Symbols listeners know how Colin feels about Telltale's accelerated output of games over the past several years. But what does Chris think about Telltale's games? Does he have a favorite Telltale series? Will another developer rise up to fill the void of narrative-driven games left by Telltale's closure? Did you play any of their games specifically?
I played season 1 of The Walking Dead, and I enjoyed it. It was a very solid little adventure game. But once I put it down, I was content with that. And I think that was the thing. It was a nice little experience to have once, but I'm just more of an action guy. When I'm playing a game, I want to experience some cool things, and I want to actually take control of the character and do insane shit by my own choice. Like, I don't necessarily care that much about making dialogue decisions or any of that. And it's interesting and it's cool, and I liked it for what it was, but it was never the thing that would keep me coming back. Especially because that game, specifically season 1 of The Walking Dead, came out at a time when I was actually not over The Walking Dead. And I was like, The Walking Dead's kind of fine. What's this game? It's actually better than the show? What? That's crazy. But then, that fades. And then you're left with Game of Thrones. And I don't care about Game of Thrones. You're playing to different fan bases almost every time you put out a game. It's inherently like splitting the base, which is weird. Like, I don't know what The Wolf Among Us is.
Yeah, The Wolf Among Us.
I still don't know what The Wolf Among Us is.
I think it's I don't know.
I heard it was good. I heard it was enjoyable, but there was nothing there for me to really care all that much about. And, Batman, we've already had fantastic Batman games.
Yeah.
That was a weird choice.
Yeah, The Wolf Among Us, I think, people can correct me if I'm wrong, I think is a visual novel.
Yeah, it's like based on fables, I think.
Yeah,
something from what I heard. But
yeah, I don't know anything about that IP. It does seem like they were the hot shit for a little while. I remember in 2012, 2013, even 2014, they were really hot. And, I knew folks that worked there, and they were living well, and they were doing well, and they were riding high on The Walking Dead. And, I have only played, well, all right, let me back up. I played a little bit of Sam & Max. I played Back to the Future, all of it. And I played The Walking Dead season 1 and the 400 Days interlude I played as well. And then I played the first season of Batman, and that's that's it. And I had good experiences there. But what I was surprised when I played Batman, I think I played Batman in 2016. And what I was surprised about with it was, it's like what I said before. I'm like, I can't believe it had been years. And I'm like, I can't believe this is the same fucking thing. And I'm not talking about from a gameplay perspective. I'm talking about like it hitches and you need to restart it. It doesn't remember things that you did in your save. It seems like it crashes every so often. And this is what happens when you fundamentally focus all on creative and all on getting the next product, but not enough on the technical back end that makes the game fundamentally sound. Because if they really invested and they slowed down and didn't release a game for a couple of years, and we're like, we're going to engineer a really special scalable engine that's going to work really well on these new consoles, it's going to work on handhelds, it's going to, we're going to be able to really be confident that we can deal with this, then they can start to increase the output. But they didn't do that. And then things would get canceled, episodes would get canceled or delayed. And it was like, they'd release like this episode out of this series, and then next month it would be like another episode from another series. And then I couldn't follow it. And I felt like they clearly bit off more than they can chew. People forget that they had a pretty significant 25% layoff last year. So the writing was on the wall with this a little bit. Yeah.
The main thing that I think is that the problem is the biggest surprise to come out of those games is the initial announcement of what they're working on. And nothing else. Like it's not like Spider-Man where you're like, oh, you hear about Spider-Man, then you see it, and like, oh my God, that's Spider-Man? Or God of War. It's like, oh, they're remaking God of War. Whoa, that's crazy. And then you see God of War, and it's like, that's God of War. Wow, it looks so crazy. It looks so different and new. But like with the Telltale games, it was like, oh, they're working on Guardians of the Galaxy. Whoa, that's crazy. And then it looks exactly like every other Telltale game that you've ever played.
To be honest with you, when I was researching to write this up, and I was looking at the games, I'm like, oh yeah, they did make a Guardians of the Galaxy game. I totally forgot.
Wait, it came out? It came out?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know it came out. I thought it was like one of those ones that we just haven't seen yet.
No, I think it did. I'm going to look it up real quick. I'm typing away.
I'm surprised I didn't hear about that because I actually love Guardians of the Galaxy.
It came out. Yeah, it was out. The game's first episode was released April 18, 2017.
Wow. That's a while ago.
And there are 5 episodes. Yeah. Oh the last one came out, episode 5 came out November 7th, 2017. But the point is that if the sales data I was shown is true, and I think it is, that like there was just very minimal interest in any of these things too, because you have to market your games, you have to get people excited about them. If you give people too much of a good thing, and I think Telltale was a good thing. I think that it wasn't always a good thing. If you go back and play Jurassic Park or Sam & Max and Back to the Future, those are not great games. But I think Telltale, really hit its stride with The Walking Dead. And so I think that there are just consequences, and we're going to get into those in a little while. But I want to take the next question from Corey Hahn, who wrote in and said, hey, Colin and Chris, an anonymous source recently informed US Gamer that Telltale Games is set to lay off a sizable portion of their workforce. The smaller crew is supposed to finish up the last season of The Walking Dead, while the Wolf Among Us 2 and Stranger Things projects have been canceled. That's not exactly true. It looks like The Walking Dead is canceled. In your estimation, what happened to Telltale Games, as it seemed they had several great projects churning along with Batman, Minecraft, Guardians of the Galaxy, and The Walking Dead? Were these games not selling well? Was the licensing fee eating that much of their margins? Did the installment method of delivery turn lots of people away? Would love to hear your input as always. Thanks for delivering a great show every week. I think that there's multiple things to be said here, Chris, and I'll be interested to see what you say about this. I think getting the IP is very wise, but you'll hear from a lot of studios, especially independent studios, that the most important thing they can do is to retain control of their IP. The problem with Telltale, and why I'm so confused why people are like, oh, someone should acquire Telltale, I'm like, for what? They don't own anything that they made,
Yeah.
They don't own literally any of it. They have nothing. They don't own Sam & Max. They don't own Back to the Future. They don't own The Walking Dead. They don't own Jurassic Park. They don't own Guardians of the Galaxy. They don't own Game of Thrones, Borderlands. And that's the problem. And I think that is a problem. So they might have made really weird deals in the beginning when they were most successful that were not advantageous to them, where they were not getting maybe back-end royalties to the degree that they thought they would get them or whatever. And maybe even were selling their games statically. In other words, meaning like, we'll take X amount of money and deliver the game and it's yours and you own the IP. And so we split the money from there. Something clearly financially went very awry in the back end. But I think a major problem is that they never invested in their own IP. And whether or not they would have succeeded or found success in that regard, I don't know. But the reality is that Telltale has nothing that would make them valuable to anyone else. Their engine's awful, and their games are owned. They publish those games, but they're owned by others.
Yeah.
So that's a major issue. What do you think about the installment delivery system, though? I am actually quite intrigued by it. And I thought it was pretty interesting to do that. I would always wait for everything to be out before I played, but I like the idea of having this thing where it's like every month you get a new little portion of the game. I don't know that turned people off. Maybe it did, but I liked it. I thought it was novel for our industry.
I think it was neat, but it was also, I do think it was kind of a turnoff for me. especially after, because I played The Walking Dead season 1 after everything was out, so I was able to just kind of like breeze through it in a day, and I enjoyed it. I was down for the second season, and then I think I had the first episode, and then I straight up forgot about it because I just like there's too much stuff going on. There's too many games to play, especially now. I can't imagine that I'd be taking a break to play through an episode of The Walking Dead now.
Me neither. Lockmort wrote into us, and this is a tough question. I give him credit for asking it because it's always hard to ask these kinds of questions or talk about these kinds of things, but we always want to be honest and have the candid conversations here on Sacred Symbols. He says, hey guys, as soon as the Telltale news broke, social media was overflowing with love and compassion for its former employees. That's all good and well, but shouldn't this also be a time where people take some responsibility for their actions? Don't get me wrong, I feel for the people who lost their jobs, which is horrible, of course, but is anyone, apart from you guys, I presume, going to acknowledge the fact that a studio doesn't just close down for no reason? It's only natural for the buck to stop at management level, and I'm sure the gaming industry gossip machine will go into overdrive in the next couple of days, possibly rightfully, slandering the Telltale execs and their decisions. But let's get real here for a second. Telltale hasn't had an actual good game since Tales of the Borderlands in 2014. Broken engine, last generation animations, and spreading teams to them aside, their more recent games also severely lacked in the narrative department, or else they would have sold much better, especially with high-profile IPs like Batman and Guardians of the Galaxy. It might be a difficult and not very fun question to answer, but don't you think that creative talent, especially the writers and animators who everybody rightfully feels sorry for, are perhaps also partially to blame for their own demise? What do you make of that? That's a pretty deep and hard to ask question, and I respect that he asked it. I think that I disagree with him, but I'm curious what you or how you feel about that.
I think this is primarily a money issue. I think this is primarily a management issue. I think you could theoretically make the claim that, yeah, I guess it takes a village to succeed and it also takes a village to fail. One person's not going to knock the whole thing overboard. But the degree of impact, I think, is severely different. Like, the managerial mismanagement is far more of a factor than maybe stagnating writing. Because, like you said, these are high-profile IPs. Where was the marketing for Guardians of the Galaxy? Where was that marketing? I didn't see it. I love Guardians of the Galaxy. I had no idea this game came out. Straight up. I thought it was still being made. So that's not something that the writers would have been able to solve. That's a marketing thing, which is also comes down to a money thing. So I think it's more about the impact. Like, everybody's at fault to some degree, but like there are people who are just not nearly as at fault as others, I think is what it comes down to.
Sure. I think that there's no doubt, being totally honest and open, with 250 people, there's no doubt that there were some duds working there. I mean, that's the truth at any studio. People that weren't very good at their jobs, didn't care a great deal about their jobs, whatever. To act like everyone that worked at Telltale was the epitome of top tier talent is absurd. Of course, that's not true. Yeah. But that's not exclusive to Telltale, and it doesn't excuse the fact, because you used the term the buck stops, with management, and I think that's important to reiterate. The buck doesn't stop with the people in the trenches. The buck stops with the people making the decisions. And if you have 250 people and you're trying to put out that many games, teams are flexible, and small teams make big games sometimes, and you see how that turns out sometimes with No Man's Sky being made essentially by 6 people.
Yeah.
But I do feel like the problem with Telltale is that they just scaled too big. They became too big for their britches. They started to believe their own hype. And that began at management, and management makes the decisions, which trickles down to people in the trenches, and they do what they're asked to do, and they did what they were asked to do. If you're given a tight timeline to turn around these games like they're turning them around, what are you supposed to do? And I think you'd be surprised to learn that, really talented people once worked at Telltale that work at other studios and make great games. Firewatch and Campo Santos were founded by people that basically were responsible for the first season of The Walking Dead, ironically, Telltale's biggest success. So, Lockmore, I understand what you're saying, but I don't really want to cast blame on the people that lost their jobs, not because they lost their jobs and that's sad, which is its own isolated thing, but because I don't authentically think it was their fault that this happened. Like, when I talk about the financial crisis in 2008, 2009 sometimes, the thing that frustrates me is that everyone wants to blame the 1%, wants to blame the banks. No one wants to take their personal responsibility to say, I bought the house that I had no business owning, I couldn't afford, I took a low interest adjustable rate mortgage, and I overextended myself. Yeah, there's lots of blame to go around there, and we don't often talk about that, and that's its own situation. So taking that same through line and kind of applying it here seems tempting, but I just don't think it's an accurate representation of what actually happened to Telltale, because all you have to look at is how thin they were stretched, and how 250 people, by the way, not all of whom are making the game, maybe 200 of them are actually making the game, the other 50 are probably administrative and other people doing things. It's not enough. It's just not enough. Mm-hmm. And they should have been wiser. They should have been wiser with their investments. They should have slowed down, and they should have did the right thing, and they didn't. And Telltale burned brightly, and now it's gone. And It's sad. But I don't think that I'm comfortable personally. Anyone else can be comfortable with it. I don't think I would put the onus on the people that work there. I think I'd put the onus on the people who are telling people what to do. I own a business and the buck stops with me. And I think that other people have to kind of take that on board as well. Matthew Jarrett talks a little bit about this. He says, what went wrong and when will THQ Nordic buy the IP? I know we already talked about this and he had other things to say. There's nothing to buy, Matthew. There's nothing to buy. They don't own anything. This is the problem with Telltale, is that the shell of the company is worthless. It's just totally worthless. It's the people that worked there at one time that might have had some value to keep them together. And remember, like when Sony shuttered Evolution Studios, the guys that made MotorStorm and Drive Club, another publisher came in and gave them life again. But it was the team that they wanted. It wasn't the IP, which Evolution didn't own. Sony owned it. So it's a similar situation here where someone might want to swoop in and say, like, we want to keep the talent together in some fashion, and we're going to fund you guys to do a new game. But what I think the more likely outcome is going to be is that like a few, centers of gravity there will make their own teams, and you'll see people over the next few months making their own small games. Jacob Perez has an interesting aside, which I think is relevant. Hey guys, love the show. With the recent closure of one studio at Capcom, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and all of Telltale, do you think raising the price of games could help stave off the current staff of up than downsized nature of the business? I have my own thoughts about paid DLC without editorializing. Games should cost more money. Paid DLC is the only thing at this point not making games cost $80 to $100. Could the cost of games going up help ameliorate these situations? Possibly.
Maybe. I don't really see why they would. I think mismanagement is mismanagement, no matter, you know what I mean? If Telltale's games had sold just a little bit more, I still think you would have this exact problem because it stops with the management.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think it would ameliorate anything.
Games are too cheap.
Yeah,
and,
I agree.
And we've talked about that in the past. AAA games are going to cost more money next generation. Get used to it. At least $70, I would say. And
do you think they have the balls to jump to 80?
Maybe. We talked about that, because 80 was your prediction, and $80 would probably bring the games more in line to their actual value on the market. I mean, $80 because of inflation just, buys what $60 bought 10 years ago. It's just the way, unfortunately, the inflation situation, the inflationary money situation we find ourselves in the United States and elsewhere in the West, that's just the way it works. And, central banks and stuff do all of that, and we won't get into the politics of it, but you have to adjust. You can't just say, like, I've been paying $60 for 10 years and I'm always going to pay $60. It's like, no, you're not. You're just not. And I'll remind you that games were way more expensive during the NES, SNES, Genesis, etc. years. Way more expensive. Saulius Vecteris wrote in and said, hello, Colin and Chris. Great show. Love your hard work. Topic on Telltale layoffs. One question. If you buy season pass of the last Walking Dead game and they don't fulfill their promise to give you all 4 episodes, whose fault is that? You cannot refund this game, but you paid them for a full game. Is this a scam?
Yeah, that's messed up. That's someone's probably really sweating about this.
I'll be interested to see how that's taken care of, because the suddenness of the closure, the fact that there's no severance and insurance is being cut off, lets me know that Telltale has no money. Nothing.
Yeah, there's no.
And they're probably going to declare bankruptcy. So I don't see how you can even ever get your refund back. Maybe Sony and Microsoft would be nice enough to say, like, we'll give you our 30% rip back, but we can't obviously give you the money we already paid to. Because when you pay for a game, typically you're paying 70% to the person who made it or the developer or publisher, and you're paying 30% to the stakeholder on the console in which you're playing it on. So Sony and Microsoft, for instance, could say, like, yeah, we'll give you back a partial refund based on the money we made on this, but we can't do anything for the other stuff. That would be up to Telltale to take care of that. Alan Esparza wrote in and said, I know everyone is concerned about the Telltale's layoffs. However, my question is about the layoffs in the gaming industry in general. Could you tell us stories or experiences about employees from the gaming industry that have been laid off in the past? Like, how easy was it to get another job if they live with a constant fear of being unemployed? The churn in the gaming industry is notorious if you're not working at a massive studio or like a really successful studio. Like Insomniac's not going to shed anyone after Spider-Man. Naughty Dog clearly isn't shedding anyone after Uncharted and The Last of Us. But it's very common for teams to work on a game with some knowledge that it's going to be all over for them once the game is shipped. And that's the unfortunate reality of the situation. And a lot of people are talking about, should developers unionize? And that's going to be virtually impossible to do because of the cross-country lines that games are developed in. And it's just like a whole complicated mess. And I think the onus is on publishers to just treat people more fairly and more equitably. And, developers are actually paid very well. Gaming developers make a lot of money. And, not all of them. But if you have a technical skill that can parlay into a video game, you can also take that technical skill to Silicon Valley and work at an app developer or whatever. So you have to be paid well in order to retain your talent. And they are paid well. And it's not unusual to find developers that make 6 figures. So from a point A to point B situation, when they're making a game, there's nothing to really feel bad about because they're being well compensated and they're working hard and all of that. But yeah, there's a diminishing return, and a lot of people are being pushed out of the games industry and going to other things because it's hard to find stability. And when you want to have a family and you want to settle down, it's really difficult to be stable. I mean, imagine if you were working at Boss Key Studios in North Carolina, which was Cliffy B's studio that was recently shut down. You don't really have, if you want to stay in North Carolina and you have a family and they're in school, you have kids in school and stuff, you have nowhere to go except for like maybe Epic and maybe Insomniac, because they have a North Carolina studio. Like, your choices are very limited, and it's very incestuous because everyone else that just lost their jobs are also trying to get into those studios if they don't want to leave. And that's the problem. And that's why people move around a lot. That's why people come and go. And that's why people really seek out stability. And when you find that stability, you typically stay. John Polk wrote in and said, in regards to the Telltale layoffs, how will this affect the trophies of The Walking Dead final season? There are only 2 episodes in, so I'm guessing this is going to piss off trophy hunters who will never have an unattainable platinum. Also, will people who bought the season pass get a refund on the game? Well, we talked about that already. I don't know. That's in flux. The trophy question is super interesting.
Yeah.
Because there is a full trophy list for the entire game, and they will never be attainable.
That's messed up.
And I don't know that there are any other examples of that in existence, apart from maybe, I think there was a canceled version of NBA Live from like 2012 or 2013 that was literally like printed and done, and then they just never shipped it because it was so bad. And some people have it. So I think that that's an example of a trophy list that's basically unattainable. But other than that, can't think of any. So
yeah, I was trying to think of like a time that's happened before, and I'm surely there's been studios that have shut down, but
I can't remember the last time this has been a problem. It's going to be an interesting thing going forward because, like, I mean, it's obviously possible, but I never once thought about this scenario ever. But it's also just the episodic nature of Telltale games. It's pretty unique,
right,
in that regard also.
What's interesting about it, though, for me, Chris, is there's something here. For the trophy list to be put up, it must be attainable in some way because they need to QA it. So what my assumption is that the last episodes of The Walking Dead are done. They're probably just not ready to be played. They're probably in alpha format or something like that, and they need to be QA'd and refined and all those kinds of things. But it does make me feel like maybe they will come out, and I know that there are different rumors going around and it's hard to know what's true and what's false, but if there was one thing being said about Telltale that I would think is not true, it's that The Walking Dead is canceled. Like, I feel like maybe they'll figure out a way to get that out, because the word is that the people that they left behind are working on something else entirely. Everyone assumed originally they were going to work on getting The Walking Dead out. You can read between the lines. There's like some weird stuff about all this to figure out. More bad news. Number 5. Capcom has shuttered its internal Vancouver-based studio, Capcom Vancouver. Capcom confirmed the news last week, noting in Kotaku, quote, as a result of reviewing titles in development at Capcom Vancouver, Capcom has decided to cancel the development projects at the studio and will concentrate development of major titles in Japan, end quote. Capcom Vancouver employed 158 people at the time of the closure, with only a select few remaining through the end of 2018 to clean things up. Capcom Vancouver was founded in 2005 as Blue Castle Games. It originally worked on its baseball series, The Bigs, before pivoting to Dead Rising, beginning with Dead Rising 2 in 2010. Its most recent AAA game was Dead Rising 4, which came to Xbox One back in 2016, and it launched Puzzle Fighter on mobile platforms last year. It's unclear what games it had in development and were therefore canceled, though Capcom is reported to be losing tens of millions of dollars in the immediate wake of the studio's closure.
Oof. Man, that's rough.
Yeah, they apparently had games pretty well in development and pretty serious investments being made there, and I wonder what happened to make them want to pull the plug that rapidly, especially because Capcom's actually doing great. And that might be one of the reasons, is that Capcom's like, we just want to bring everything back home and have everything developed here where we can have more control and trust, because there aren't any other studios that Capcom owns, as far as I know, that are outside of Japan other than Capcom Vancouver.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Were you a Dead Rising fan?
I like the original. I always had an issue with the save thing. Like, you had to find a bathroom to save, and I kept dying. I was like, no. we're past this. We're past this point where you have to go to a place to save. It was a very neat technical achievement too. Like, just the sheer amount of zombies on screen was actually like incredibly impressive to me at the time.
Dead Rising was, partially the brainchild of Keiji Inafune, who created Mega Man, one of my favorite series. So I always was intrigued by it. And the original Dead Rising was developed internally at Capcom, and they moved the sequel and everything else to Capcom Vancouver. They took over. And I can't help but feel that Capcom set Capcom Vancouver up to fail, especially by making Dead Rising 3 and Dead Rising 4 timed Xbox One exclusives, and kind of limiting their reach and limiting their ability, much like Square Enix rather did with Tomb Raider, limiting their ability to make their money back, and then kind of they suffer because of it. It's kind of unfair, but again, it goes back to what we were saying about Telltale and where the buck stops. The buck stops with the people who made those decisions. It's not Capcom Vancouver's fault that they made the games that they were made to, or they were asked to make. So it's very sad news, and I was especially sad to hear it because I always thought that they were the perfect studio to make an open world Mega Man game. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they were working on. And I wonder if that will ever sneak out. The news of that will sneak out as time goes on. Number 6. Some of PlayStation Now's offerings are now available to be downloaded and played offline, a gigantic move for the service that slowly brings it more in line with Microsoft's stellar Xbox Game Pass. Word comes by way of the PlayStation blog, which notes that in addition to streaming games, which is what PS Now was originally designed to do, subscribers can grab offered games and put them directly onto their console so long as they're PS4 games or PS2 games made to be played on PS4. Better yet, this carries over to DLC, microtransactions, and other perks often attached to games. PS3 games cannot be downloaded and played in this fashion, stopping PlayStation Now's evolution into backwards compatibility, which is a cornerstone of the Xbox One ecosystem. This was interesting news that I saw, Chris, and when I first saw it, I'm like, all right, who cares? And then I went back and I was like, oh, this is kind of like Game Pass now. Like, this is pretty much indistinguishable from Game Pass, actually.
Kind of. See, the thing about this is it's a service that allows you to... Because Game Pass is just, it gives you games, like for free for a service, for like a fee. But the way backwards compatibility on the Xbox works, it's just the game that you can buy and download. Sometimes some of them are included with Game Pass, but it's just a marketplace like you would find on any current console. So the thing that's confusing to me is like, do you need to pay for a membership to be able to play backwards compatible games? That seems a little odd.
It's an interesting point. Because what you're basically saying is that it's kind of like a clever ploy for them to extract more money for something that should already be available.
Yeah, just give me the games and let me download them. Especially if they are already there to be downloaded and played, let me own them. I think it's weird that they're locking it behind a membership.
That's interesting, although I do wonder if it's just the evolution, like PlayStation Now is eventually just going to evolve into...
Yeah, maybe.
6 one and half dozen of the other. Sakani Adebimpe, I'm sorry, I think I mispronounced your name, said, hello, Colin and Chris. Just this week, Sony revealed changes to PlayStation Now, in which you can download PS4 and PS2 games for offline use. Do you believe this is a potential indication of Sony's future interest in a streaming platform similar that they will continue to amend in the future and heavily promote through the next generation? Or is this simply a move to spur short-term interest in the service given its flawed functionality? What he's basically asking is this doubling down on PlayStation Now indicate that this is here to stay? Because some people thought PlayStation Now was maybe this ephemeral kind of service that maybe wouldn't garner a lot of support, and maybe something like this will obviously get people involved, especially because they're now charging like $100 a year for it, which I think is cheaper than Game Pass.
I think so. I believe so, yeah.
So, because I think Game Pass is $9.99 a month, so that will make it about $20 cheaper. It's interesting. Like, do you think that this is a play for them to kind of make it kind of a viable product for future consumption, or do you think it's them trying to make it more relevant in the now? Pardon the pun.
I think it's a bit of both. I think it's a way for them to kind of react to Microsoft without actually introducing anything new. It's a way for them to just be like, hey, we've had this thing. It's almost like hey, we already had this, let's just make it better. I do think it's mostly just like a goodwill thing. Like, hey, you can do this now. We don't have that much time left in this generation anyway. Might as well just do this one thing. It probably didn't take all that much effort to pull off, especially since there's no PS3 games available. I think it's really just kind of like just holding people over until we figure out what they're going to do next gen.
It's interesting. I think that this is a test bed for them to see if what people are saying with Xbox Game Pass and how alluring that is to them, could this be a different option? And can we basically approach it with streaming and with, downloadable native downloading games? And can we make it so that we have 3 platforms accessible at all times when Game Pass, I think, is only focused on Xbox One? They have a focus now on PS2 games, PS3 games, which you cannot download, which indicates why PS3 games are still not backwards compatible with PS4. It seems like they're just not going to work. But I think it's a way for them to kind of, build a little wall around their market and see if it works or not. And so I give them credit for that. I think it's a really cool move.
Yeah.
Drew D'Amato says, hey guys, what are your thoughts on PS Now letting you download certain games to the PS4 console instead of just streaming? This seems like a pretty direct response to Microsoft's Game Pass. Do you think that this is the beginning of them borrowing from their recent consumer-friendly tactics, such as letting more recent games on the platform as well? Or is this just a one-off to prop up the platform and service? What Drew's really asking here that I think we could talk about, Chris, is are they slowly abandoning the idea of streaming games? And like this is a way for them to segue and like turn off one of the switches and then turn off the other one. So it's like in 2 years, PlayStation Now just doesn't stream games at all. And it's literally just like the Game Pass. Do you think that that's something that they might be approaching?
I think so, yeah. I think either that or they're trying to get it established enough so a lot more people pay attention to it But I
Like,
do think
I'm sorry.
I don't know. No, I don't necessarily think they're going to abandon streaming. I do think they're going to start focusing less on it. But
I just don't see what's stopping them, especially if PS5 is so powerful. What would stop them from just emulating PS3 games on it, which is what they're doing with PS2 games. Like, just make a PS3 emulator.
Oh no, absolutely. But even like on PC, people are having like an insanely difficult time emulating PS3 games. Like Uncharted, there was a big thing recently where I saw a video of somebody freaking out. We got Uncharted running on PC. We got it, and it's the lighting's broken. It's like 5 frames a second. It's really bad, and it's like if you can't get this running on a PC, like with a dedicated team of people, you know how modders are, right? They tend to do things. They tend to fix things faster than actual dev teams do. So I would just be, I don't know, I'd just be shocked to see them figure it out for the PS5. I hope they do, but I just don't see the signs pointing in that direction.
It's really weird. The cell architecture was so strange, and it really brings you back to that era where making multi-platform games now is really quite, I don't want to say easy. It's not easy, but it's quite simple and straightforward because the games are really, Xbox One and PS4 are really operating almost on the same architecture. But back when games were ported back and forth, people will remember, like, Mass Effect didn't come to PS3 for 2 years.
Yeah.
Or Mass Effect 2. BioShock didn't come to PS3 for like a year and a half.
They were exclusives.
And a lot of it had to do with the fact that Microsoft was obviously very popular, but also that it was really authentically hard to make games on the same platform because it was like 2 different teams basically kind of constructing the game at the same time. Number 7. This is huge news for Colin Moriarty. It looks like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, widely considered one of the greatest games of all time, is coming to PlayStation 4 alongside Castlevania Rondo of Blood. It was reported that the Korean Games Rating Board rated the games, but now we have confirmation that the ESRB has also rated the games, which is calling Castlevania Requiem. So the collection is very much real. Rondo of Blood was a TurboGrafx 16 Castlevania game launched in 1993. Symphony of the Night is, in terms of story, a sequel to Rondo of Blood and came to PlayStation and Saturn in 1997. They were released together in the Castlevania Dracula X Chronicles on PSP in 2008, so this may be some sort of reworked port of that compilation, though that remains to be seen.
Well, look at that. Symphony of the Night on PS4. Yet another game that's not going to be on the PlayStation Classic.
Yes.
Because it's on PlayStation 4 now. Epic.
I'm super, super amped up about that.
I'm pretty happy about it, too. I haven't played Symphony of the Night in a really long time.
I love that game, but I also love the idea of getting a platinum trophy in it, so I hope that the trophy list is robust and it's not some bullshit, because little known fact, they did release Symphony of the Night on Xbox 360 with achievements back in 2008 or 2009, but it didn't have like a full achievement list of 1,000 points. So hopefully it's not just a pull of that. My theory is that this is a port of the PSP iteration of the game. Basically, you'd play Rondo of Blood, which is a typical side-scrolling Castlevania game, more traditional, and there was a way for you to unlock Symphony of the Night, which you can then go in and play. So
that's awesome.
I'm hoping for the best. Rondo of Blood is awesome. And a lot of people don't realize that the beginning of Castlevania Symphony of the Night is the end of Rondo of Blood. And a lot of people don't realize, well, why does the game start during this random ending where you're fighting Dracula? And I'm like, because that's the way Rondo of Blood ended. You fucking noob. You disgraceful noobs.
Here we're back to the anger part of the podcast.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm angry again. Inexplicably angry. Number 8, will Elder Scrolls 6 be called Redfall? It very well could be. Newsweek has discovered a trademark in the U.S. Trademark Registry for Redfall, a trademark filed on September 10th by ZeniMax Media Inc., which is the company that owns publisher Bethesda, and the various studios, including Bethesda Game Studios, that exist underneath it. Bethesda hasn't made any comment, and for the time being, Redfall's relation to the Elder Scrolls series remains unclear. All we know for now is that ZeniMax filed for the trademark, and that the filing covers video games and related products. So that's a pretty interesting, quiet one. I would bet that is what the name of Elder Scrolls 6 is.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm happy about it.
I'll be happy about it in 3 years when we see more of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Number 9, the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney trilogy is coming to PlayStation 4, all wrapped up into a single package. This is a bit of a strange announcement, albeit a welcome one, as Phoenix Wright was for a long time a Nintendo exclusive product, specifically on its handhelds. The first game in the series, Ace Attorney, came to the Nintendo DS in 2005, having been released only in Japan on GBA in 2001. Its sequel, Justice for All, came to DS in 2006 around the world, after coming to GBA in Japan in 2002, and the third game, Trials and Tribulations, came to DS in 2007 after a Japanese-only GBA launch in 2004. The trilogy's reach stops there, though there are 3 other core Ace Attorney games launched as recently as 2016, so perhaps those will also come to PS4 at some point in the future. The Ace Attorney trilogy should launch in early 2019.
That's awesome.
I'm a huge fan of these games.
Really?
They're really great. They're really, really fun and silly and Japanese and, all of the things that I love. So you play as a lawyer.
I know of the imagery of it because I've seen, that's a very heavily memed image.
Objection!
Yeah.
For people that don't know out there, you play basically as a lawyer. You go and, solve crimes, and then you go to the court and you prove your case. And the characters are all zany. Like there's a big judge who's kind of like a zany, weird character, and like the other attorneys that you go against are always like these roving characters, and like you have an assistant. And it's cool. They're hard games, and they're really fun to play. And I'm authentically surprised by this. Like this is an authentic surprise. I was like, well, this
You
is
should
so
see the
weird.
surprise on Colin's face
Oh,
right
just-
now. It's unprecedented.
It's just I've never seen surprise such as this. So I'm excited to play those, and it just goes. Capcom just keeps bringing collections of games. They're just killing it. You know,
good.
I'll be interested to see if
It
they make
bodes
any
well.
new games anytime soon. But in the meantime, they keep releasing old games, and I'm happy enough with that.
This is like a little bit of a fundraiser.
Number 10, THQ Nordic has acquired yet more IP.
Oh boy.
On Twitter, the publisher confirmed that it purchased the Alone in the Dark horror series as well as the real-time strategy game Act of War. Atari was the previous owner of both franchises. Alone in the Dark began in 1992 on PC. Its most recent mainline release, simply called Alone in the Dark, was released in 2008, which I played for some reason, though an online-only Alone in the Dark called Illumination launched in 2015. The only Act of War game, Direct Action, came to PC in 2015. As usual, THQ's Nordic's plans with these newly acquired IP are unclear.
It's like they're like a kraken almost, and they just like swoop up out of the sea and just grab random boats and being like, oh, this boat's got Alone in the Dark on it. I guess I want it. What is happening? Alone in the Dark is not a game that I would have ever thought anyone would buy.
Completely worthless. Nate McKinney wrote in and said, howdy, Colin and Chris. Let's talk THQ Nordic. Do we have to? News broke this week that they bought yet more irrelevant IP in Alone in the Dark. What the hell is going on over there? They reportedly have 20-something games in development and are gobbling up any IP that has even half a name. I get the sense that there's a serious lack of a master plan over there. What do you guys think about that whole situation? I think you're absolutely right. Like, these IP that they're buying, unless they're literally buying, like, Atari was like, we'll give you Alone in the Dark for $25,000. Like, something like that. Then it's like, okay, I'd go buy an Alone in the Dark for $25,000 and just re-release them and make my money back. But I agree with you. They have almost nothing of actual, tangible, real value. You'll remember last week when we were talking about how they acquired Kingdoms of Amalur, and everyone's like, oh, that's cool. So they'll re-release Reckoning, which is the only Kingdoms of Amalur game. And they're like, no, we can't do that. EA owns that game. And it's like, so you just own this IP? For what? To what end?
I feel like THQ is one guy. He's just got like a bunch of money, and he's just buying a bunch of IPs and waiting to sell them to developers who actually want them.
But like, who?
That's not a good thing.
Yeah, it's
To have
not a good
shit
thing.
ton of games in development.
And who cares? Also, like, if you have like, you own the Homefront IP, which was a great IP at one time, and that Homefront fucking sucks now. So now you own
I didn't
Homefront.
even think it was that
Cool.
good.
Red Faction
The hammer physics was neat.
9 years ago.
It's still neat, honestly. Like, the destruction physics in that game is still kind of impressive to me. But I do admit, like, I don't know why.
THQ went out of business with some of these games in their library. Like, I don't quite understand what their intent is, and I'm not trying to insult them necessarily or insult their teams or insult the IP that they're acquiring. I just haven't seen a story.
Yeah.
Like, again, the Reckoning one was the one where I'm like, oh, they have something valuable. This is something that people really want. Oh, we can't do anything with it. So you're just going to make a new game in the Kingdoms of Amalur series? Why? Like, why?
I don't know.
R.A. Salvatore's not going to write the story for you anymore. Kurt Schilling has nothing to do with it, and you can't re-release the old game. So what is the point of having it?
I don't know. Maybe they're working on it. Maybe they're working on it, Colin. You gotta have faith.
THQ Nordic makes me actually furious. Like, just like talking about it, because I don't understand it. I would love to be able to sit down with them and just ask them
Like, what's going on?
Yeah, like what is to what end are you doing? Like, you're buying up all these IP that don't amount to a handful of Microsoft's or Xbox's or Nintendo's IP, like not even close. Or your real more direct competitors like Activision and Ubi and, you know, Square Enix. Like, you don't see these guys just gobbling everything up that comes along their way. It's just weird. It's just
It seems like desperate almost. There's something about it that seems kind of, you know, you're just accepting like literally everything that comes your way.
the only
It's almost like Telltale.
exactly the only thing that I can think of, Chris, is that they're buying this shit for so cheap that like it's just totally worth it to just own them.
Yeah.
Someone comes to you and they're like, "Oh, we want to make a Homefront game, like our Homefront reboot." Okay,
You wouldn't spend more money on Kingdoms of Amalur than you think you could make back.
it actually like legit bothers me. The whole thing, like the whole thing with THQ Nordic, actually like just gets under my skin. Number 11, Rockstar has finally revealed Red Dead Online, what the company describes as, quote, a new online connected experience set against the backdrop of Red Dead Redemption 2's enormous open world. Red Dead Online is an evolution of the classic multiplayer experience in the original Red Dead Redemption, blending narrative with competitive and cooperative gameplay in fun new ways, end quote. Interestingly, Rockstar confirms that Red Dead Online is playable solo as well as with others, and should come out in November of 2018 in the form of a public beta. With Red Dead Redemption 2 itself coming out on October 26th, you won't have to wait too much longer after that to jump online if you'd like. In this same vein, GameSpot notes that we still haven't gotten any word on what Red Dead Redemption 2's PlayStation 4 exclusive content will be, content that was promised when the game was revealed to the world. GameSpot points to a PlayStation blog post that said, quote, "We are pleased to announce that PS4 players get first access to earn select online content in the vast open world of Red Dead Redemption 2, end quote. Since it's online content, it appears that it'll somehow be wrapped up into whatever Red Dead Online ends up being. We may be hearing about this sooner rather than later." Are you excited about this at all?
I mean, I'm interested in it. I didn't realize until jumping into Red Dead Redemption, not even all that long ago, because I hadn't played it before this year. I didn't even realize that there was a multiplayer component to that original game. I liked what they did with GTA Online to some extent. I preferred GTA 4's online mode personally, just because it was a little bit more chaotic and fun-oriented instead of... I don't know, did you ever bother with GTA 5 Online?
No.
The thing that immediately frustrated me was like, I went into free roam and I was like, I'm excited to mess people up. Oh, you got to buy a car and you have to buy car insurance. And also you have to level up to use explosives. And I was like, oh, that's not fun at all. I don't want to do that at all.
No, that doesn't sound interesting.
So I don't know. I'm very curious as to how they're going to push out content for a cowboy game like this, because you can't put out like jets, you know?
James Gallus wrote in and said, "Hello, gentlemen. With Red Dead around the corner and more details coming out, can they recreate the magic that was GTA Online? It was easy to add cars, guns, apartments, and different clubs, but for Red Dead, how do they keep people coming back for new content?" So this is exactly what you're asking.
New horses.
New horses?
New bandanas.
New bounties?
Brand new cows.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not familiar enough with the online offers.
Maybe aliens. Maybe they'll just put cars in. They'll just put a car in anyway. You drive like a Lambo across Midwest.
That'd be awesome. Well, I'm sure they'll be. Although Red Dead doesn't seem like it's coming to PC.
I think it will. I think it will at some point. It's probably the same thing with GTA 5. They're probably going to wait a while.
Right. Because then once that happens, then you'll get cars in Red Dead in about 2 seconds.
Or, you know what'll happen? They'll probably do a similar thing that they did with GTA 5, where it's going to come out this time, and then like they'll probably sync the next gen release on PS5 with the PC release. I'm not actually sure if they did that, but I know they staggered the releases out for both generations and PCs.
Kyle Tisdale wrote in and said, "Hey, Colin and Chris. So Rockstar announced that Red Dead Online is coming a month after the game launches. They did the same thing with GTA Online, which I vividly remember it being broken for several months. It's still pretty broken, honestly. Their matchmaking is an absolute joke, and it's incredibly difficult to just follow your friends into the same match. My question is, do you think Rockstar has learned from their mistakes and RDO will be a smooth experience out of the gate? My guess is it'll take a while before it works properly, but I'm more interested to see if the mechanics and experience have been improved since GTA Online. Thanks, guys. Keep killing babies." It's an interesting thing to ask us to do, but I understand why you asked us to do it.
Yeah.
I think that they wouldn't be going down this road so soon if they didn't learn some lessons. Although, again, like they said, it's a beta.
Yeah, it is. I promise you it's going to be broken in some aspects, just because the nature of Rockstar's games, there's so much detail there and there's so many things at play at any given time that it's almost guaranteed that something is going to break. There's just way too many systems interacting. I'd imagine like as soon as you put in multiple player characters into a standard Rockstar level of any kind, you're going to see things fall apart pretty quick. So I'd imagine they probably learned enough that they probably have a pretty good handle on how to deal with those problems by now, especially just because they have experience working with the PC version of GTA 5 Online, which is probably closer to the PS4 and Xbox One version of Red Dead, architecture-wise. So I'd imagine they've probably learned enough to keep it going, but expect problems, because there's obviously going to be problems. Those games are far too detailed to not be buggy.
Also, the crush of players is going to hurt them too.
Yeah.
So,
that's what hurt them the first time initially.
Number 12. It appears Shadow of the Tomb Raider has a secret ending that was inadvertently included in the final game, only to be patched out with the day one patch. If you play the game without the patch installed, however, and you beat the game, you'll be dealt a different portion of the ending than others got with the patch, which fascinatingly points to the villain of the very first game in the Tomb Raider franchise from 1996. The bad guy's name is Jacqueline Notla, and in the ending that no one was supposed to see, you glimpse a letter written to Lara Croft from Notla, perhaps indicating that she would be included in some sort of sequel. For whatever reason, developer Eidos Montreal removed this particular scene, perhaps because it indicates the game will get a sequel that isn't necessarily forthcoming. In a comment to Kotaku, the developer said, quote, During the course of development on Shadow of the Tomb Raider, multiple post-credits scenes were explored. Unfortunately, one of the directions that was considered but not chosen was mistakenly included in the game. The Day 1 patch fixes this error, along with many other improvements.
Did you get
End
this?
quote. I didn't get it because I had the patch. Did you get it?
No. Yeah, okay, all right. No, just making sure, because I'm like...
The funny thing, dude, is that, first of all, if you're playing the game digitally, I don't think there's even any way for you to get this without the patch. So you have to have a physical version of the game, and then you have to play it offline and delete all the patches. And what's funny is that I was reading something where this was originally exposed on Reddit, and the person who like talked about it like for a day, people were like, "You're a liar." You're like just straight up didn't believe this person.
Yeah.
And people make shit up online all the time, but it's kind of sad when you read like the back and forth where like the guy's like totally right.
Yeah.
Like he's absolutely totally right. Like the ending does exist. And if you're a Tomb Raider fan, obviously you're going to want to be interested in checking that out. There are videos of it online.
That's interesting.
Number 13, it sure looks like PUBG is finally set to launch on PlayStation 4. Okay. IGN reports on a listing for a PS4 port on from the Korean Game Ratings Board. I can't read today. All but confirming that it will be launched on PS4 imminently. PUBG, or PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, first came to PC in 2017 and popularized the battle royale genre that's currently engulfing the industry, alongside Fortnite and others. A little late.
Yeah, a bit late, and also doomed. Sorry. It's just not going to work.
Number 14. Now that the Battlefield 5 open beta has concluded, developer DICE has released a detailed blog post going over what they learned from it and what changes they plan on making to the final game as a result. Promised changes include giving players a bit more health and ammunition when they spawn, changing the rules in regard to supply stations, clarifying some players at a distance so that there doesn't have to be on-screen notifiers of who is who, shortening the time to spawn, and rebalancing weapon strength and damage received. Changes have also been promised in regard to vehicles, including a deeper damage system, better flying when in the air, and more vehicles overall. Battlefield 5 launches on November 20th. Did you play in the beta at all?
No, I forgot about it.
Yeah, I didn't play it either.
Yeah, and I actually usually do, so... Oof.
Dominic Brandt wrote in, said, "Hello, Colin and Chris. As mentioned at the end of episode 12, Battlefield 5 appears to be in trouble already as the game's pre-order numbers are lower than expected. Do you guys think this will be a signal and a shift? This will signal a shift in EA's strategy towards their marquee titles? I can't help but think that the Star Wars Battlefront 2 fiasco is playing a large part in the poor sales that Battlefield 5 may experience. So will EA make an effort to get on the good side of the gaming community, or will it run two of its franchises into the ground with poor business and marketing decisions? Love the show. Keep up the good work." What do you make of that?
I think they're already trying to get on the consumer's good side with how they're treating Anthem. The way they're specifically talking about loot boxes and monetization, they know that Anthem has to do well. Like, Anthem has to do well. In the wake of this Battlefield problem, in the wake of the Battlefront fiasco that was so impressively... What an impressive misstep that was. Anthem needs to have the best possible PR for this to be something to shrug off.
100% agreed. And I think that they're starting even with Battlefield 5. It seemed like the beta was well communicated. It was well populated. It seemed like people did like it when they played it, from what I can tell. And it seems like they got a lot of feedback that they were actively trying to change the game. Remember, the game got punted a little bit, so they give them a little more time as opposed to it being basically a demo. So I think that's another way for them to kind of mend fences. But I agree with you. Anthem, not only does Anthem have to do well, Anthem has to be good. And I think that EA is going to delay Anthem if it's not good enough, because they can't fuck that up.
Yeah, they just can't afford it.
When you really look back at EA, I mean, their sports games are obviously humming, and they have some other select games that are coming out, but they don't really have that much that's like doing great or has a lot of goodwill, even in the single player realm. I mean, look at Mass Effect Andromeda, what we were talking about at length last week. Like they just need to do something to solve this problem, and the fact that people are upset with EA, I understand.
Yeah.
Number 15 is a wrap-up. Push Square reports that Oni Chambara is coming to PlayStation 4 in the form of Oni Chambara Origin, which is a remake of the first two games in the franchise from the PS2 era, when we knew it as Zombie Zone or Zombie Hunters. That game's a little perverted. A Western release hasn't been confirmed, however. Gamatsu reports that Stranded Deep, a game about a plane crash in the Pacific, is coming to PS4 on October 9th. The website also reports that Root Letter Last Answer is coming to PS4 and Vita at an unspecified time in the future, and that 2D side-scrolling shooter Devil Engine will be coming to PS4 in 2019. Crossover Fighter Jump Force is getting a beta, Season Pass, and Collector's Edition in time for its February 2019 release, according to IGN. Rocket League developer Psyonix has confirmed that a staggering 50 million players have played their game, which initially launched back in 2015. I had lunch with my old friend Jeremy Dunham when I was in San Diego, the VP of Psyonix, who hired me at IGN when he was editor-in-chief, and they're doing very well. And finally, GameSpot reports that Devil May Cry 5 is going to have microtransactions and possible other online and multiplayer functionality, though the exact details are still unknown. This is making some people angry.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Now, Chris, we've gone a long ways on this episode. Typically, we end after we're going to read the games, but typically after that, we go into the questions for the users. I think we're going to wrap though after we read the game list.
Yeah,
I think that
that's
makes
fair.
sense because we've gone a long time because we had news and we had a lot of questions. I hope that's okay with all of you out there. I don't want to demand your attention for more than 2 hours or so. I feel like that I start to lose you after that. Maybe
No,
I'm wrong. You guys can let us know if you guys want us to go longer in the future. If it's necessary, then let us know. But I don't want to make it any longer than it has to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So let's read the games. There are 25 of them coming out this week. And Chris, I will allow you to have the ball first.
Oh, you sure? I really want this second one, man.
Oh, you want the second one? Then I'll go
second one
first.
I'm excited about.
Cameron Seaman did write into us to let us know that there are 25 games this week and that his thoughts are with us. Not as many as the 27 from 2 weeks ago. But
Thank you for
we're
your
up there.
prayers.
Air Missions Hind comes to PS4. It is a Wednesday release. Air Missions Hind is an action combat flight simulator based on the Russian Mi-24 Hind assault helicopter. Equip the weapon of your choice and use those weapons to tear up the sky in single-player and multiplayer modes.
The Cat in the Coup comes to PS4. Play as the cat of Dr. Mohammed Mossadegh.
Mossadegh, I think?
Mossadegh, the first democratically elected prime minister of Iran, coaxed Mossadegh back through significant events of his life by knocking objects off shelves, scattering his papers, and scratching him. That's the Cat in the Coup.
That's a real game.
For
I guess,
PS4.
yeah, I guess based on the 1954 Iranian coup, I assume?
I don't know. I'm just excited. I'm actually like, I want this. I want this game.
Catastronauts, which I thought was Cat Astronauts, comes to PS4. It's a Friday release. Can you deal with unrelenting disaster and hold your ship together long enough to destroy the enemy invaders? Gather your friends and join the illustrious space fleet in this fast-paced party game. Sounds like quite the party.
Yeah, it's a beautiful party. Creed Rise to Glory comes to PSVR at retail. Do you have what it takes to become a champion? Follow the ascent of boxer Adonis Creed as you go toe-to-toe with the world's top opponents in an intense boxing experience that lets you train, fight, and win like a Creed.
I seem to recall a Creed going down like a bitch in one of those movies as well, so I don't know if you always want to win like a Creed.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Cryptract comes to PS4. Cryptract is a free-to-play online fantasy RPG with turn-based battles in which lords can form contracts with mystical beasts to fight together. Combine strengths with your newfound allies and form your own ultimate army.
Dakar 18 comes to PS4. Dakar 18 is a realistic simulation of the world-famous annual rally raid organized by Amori Sport Organization, ASO, in South America, and features stunning visuals and many vehicles, including motorcycles, cars, trucks, quads, and SXS.
What does that mean? SXS? I don't know. I've never heard of that in my life.
That messed with me real bad.
Dark Eclipse comes to PS4. It's a Wednesday release. Dark Eclipse is PS4's first ever VR MOBA. It sounds horrible. Command a team of 3 leaders, each with their own unique characteristics and abilities, and battle for supremacy in the post-apocalyptic dark fantasy world of Oldus.
All right. Deployment comes to PS4. Deploy your troops and get ready for epic battles in Deployment, the new competitive top-down shooter game by the creators of We Are the Dwarves. It's beautiful.
FIFA 19 comes to PS4 retail. It's a Friday release. FIFA 19 delivers a champion caliber experience on and off the pitch, led by the prestigious, and I think you say UEFA, Champions League. I think that's how you say it. FIFA 19 offers enhanced gameplay tools that allow you to control the pitch in every moment and unrivaled ways to play. I'm sure that game will sell very well.
Freaky Awesome comes to PS4. It's a Friday release. Freaky Awesome is a highly dynamic roguelike where you'll gain mutations by contact with the remains of your enemies. Play solo or co-op with your friends.
The Grand Museum VR comes to PSVR. This virtual museum environment contains 82 models of real-world ancient works of art, originating from many ancient cultures of Europe, Asia, and Northern Africa. Investigate the archives and discover the history of the art pieces.
Hollow Knight Voidheart Edition comes to PS4. Descend into the world of Hollow Knight, the award-winning action-adventure of insects and heroes. Explore twisting caverns, ancient cities, and deadly wastes. Battle tainted creatures and befriend bizarre bugs.
Looking forward to that.
It's beautiful.
Gonna probably download that tonight. Jack and Jill DX comes to PS4 and Vita. Once upon a time, Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. It didn't particularly end well for them, and to be honest, things aren't exactly great for another Jack and Jill either. 140 levels and a bunch of mini games. Still have no idea what the hell it's about. Thank you for that.
Life is Strange 2, Episode 1 comes to PS4 as a Wednesday release. The long-awaited sequel to the award-winning Life is Strange returns. Two brothers, aged 16 and 9, are forced to run away from home after a tragic incident while attempting to conceal a sudden and mysterious supernatural power.
Metal Max Xeno comes to PS4 at retail. Metal Max Xeno is a post-apocalyptic RPG. Collect and customize tanks to battle mutated creatures and robotic enemies.
Oh, it's really straightforward.
Yeah, I know. Thank you.
Yeah. Perception Remastered comes to PS4 as a Thursday release. An award-winning narrative thriller about a blind woman's journey to uncover the truth about the mansion from her nightmares or become one of its victims. It's like weird for me for some reason. Using sound as sight, Cassie explores Echo Bluff, desperate to unravel its sordid history. Sounds kind of neat. What is that? Remastered?
Yeah, I think it's already out. I like the logo because it says Perception and then it says Perception in Braille.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Pilot Sports comes to PS4 Thursday release. Pilot Sports is brilliant gaming fun for the whole family. Split screen mode and unlockable courses for up to 4 players over 50 different courses. A variety of aircraft and thrilling challenges provide for all sorts of gaming enjoyment.
Pitter Pot comes to PS4. Pitter Pot is a 3D platforming adventure game. Play as Pitter Pot, a magical potted plant. Use abilities to explore levels, collect seeds, defeat the weeds, and save the garden. There's a lot of garden-themed games now I think about it.
I know. It all was just Plants vs. Zombies. That was enough for me.
Yeah.
I love that game. Punchline comes to PS4 and Vita. Punchline is the newest visual novel adventure from the creators of Zero Escape and the Science Adventure series. That's it.
Okay. Revenant Dogma comes to PS4 and PS Vita. Revenant Dogma is a fantasy RPG featuring stunning 3D battles. Kane enters a ruins site in search of a relic and meets a mysterious girl in a mask, kicking off a grand scheme that will change the worlds of humans and Therians.
Couldn't they just say Kane enters ruins in search of a relic?
Yeah, a ruins site is a weird way to word that.
Think of the Children comes to PS4. Little Bobby's dead. Didn't we already read this once? They must have pushed this back.
Maybe?
I feel like we read this.
This sounds vaguely familiar, but I'm also not convinced that it is.
Think of the Children comes to PS4. Little Bobby's dead. The barbecue is on fire. Jen's eating poisonous berries, and the birthday cake still needs icing. Just another wonderful day out with the kids, and think of the Children. A frantic parenting simulator for up to 4 players. It sounds funny.
Yeah, I like this next one too. This is The Police 2. Comes to PS4 and retail. Interpret the law as you see fit. Run the sheriff's department, manage your cops, make tough decisions, and try to keep out of prison yourself in this story-driven mixture of adventure, strategy, and turn-based tactical combat.
That does sound pretty cool.
Yeah,
Might have to check that out.
It's kind of neat.
Time Spinner comes to PS4 and Vita. I'm super excited about this one. Time Spinner is a beautifully crafted, story-driven adventure inspired by classic 90s action platformers. Timekeeper Lunes is on a quest to avenge her slain family using time-bending powers to explore an interconnected world. It is a Metroidvania, if you guys are curious.
Oh, cool. Toon War comes to PS4. Your mission is to liberate peaceful villages from evil forces, eliminate enemies, and win over dangerous bosses. Toon War is a twin-stick shooter game with colorful and vivid graphics.
And finally, Christopher, Valkyria Chronicles 4 comes to PS4 at retail. Commander Claude Wallace and his childhood friends set out to fight for freedom in the desperate war, but bone-chilling blizzards, waves of Imperial soldiers, and the godlike powers of the Valkyria stand between them and victory. I'm looking forward to playing that one as well.
Quite a week.
There's a lot of games in there that are actually pretty good. I'm sure a lot of you will enjoy FIFA, Hollow Knight, Time Spinners, etc.
I'm interested in this Cat in the Coup thing. It looks kind of weird. Sounds kind of weird.
Could play it and report back next week.
Yeah, maybe.
Now, as you guys know, typically we would end our show with reader questions, what we call reader questions, even though none of you are reading this because it's a podcast, but we're going to continue to call them reader questions that you guys submit on Patreon at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. It's the only way to submit questions, comments, concerns, and interact with us on the show. But this will be the longest episode of the show to date, I think.
Yeah.
So we're going to
we could probably cut it down, you think?
Yeah, we'll wrap it up and now without the questions because we included so many of them in the news. It was just such a news-heavy week.
Yeah.
That I felt like we made the right choice there.
Nah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we hope you enjoyed it. The good news and the bad news, the insights, the laughs, the crying, the trials and the tribulations. We hope you enjoyed all that. Remember, you can support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand for ad-free early access to every episode of the show. It also allows you, again, to interact with us, submit questions. You get exclusive podcasts after this, after we go to lunch. Chris and I are actually going to record this month's exclusive Sacred Symbols that will only be available to patrons over at Colin's Last Stand's Patreon. And we are answering questions only about Nintendo, Xbox, and PC on that episode. It's called The Other Guys. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be a pretty fun episode that's going to be completely driven by your guys' questions. So by the time you hear this on free feeds, that episode should be live for you as well. Chris, I thank you for your time.
Of course.
I thank all of you out there for supporting Sacred Symbols, our precious little show. And we'll see you next week for more. Take care.
Take care, guys. Oh, you stole my take care. How dare you steal my take care? I end every episode with take care.
Let's try again. Goodbye. See, now you left me hanging. You didn't
now
do
you gotta cut it. Now you gotta end it with.
Oh, you son of a bitch. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is fan-supported over at patreon.com/Colin's Last Stand. The following names are at the producer level or higher on Patreon, and I want to thank you from the very bottom of my heart for your incredible kindness and generosity. Azan Isa Al-Raisi, Ahmad Alaways, Martin Beck, Fred Bentz, Michael Betts, Eric Bishop, David Blodel, Mark Boggio, Spencer Brand, Isaac Brewer, Lennon Brixey, Jeremy Brokos, Matthew Brousseau, Josh Bushing, Austin Bullock, Andrew Burkhart, Dylan Burns, Alex Cabrera, Brian Cacciatolo, Will Caldwell, Jason Camargo, Matthew Canoy, William O'Carroll, Matthew Carter, William Cashel, Brian Chand, Travis Chandler, Sean Chandler, Kenneth Char, David Chestnut, Steve Clifford, Chris Cochran, Simon Conception Jr., Brad Cooley, David Cox, Cutter Crow, Nick Cummings, Daniel Diamore, Daniel Delanikos, Travis Depew, Mitchell Durkash, David Ellis, Albert Escobar, Brian Fink, Joe Finelli, Eric Finkenbeiner, Stefano Fontana, Photios Frangos, Connor Gassian, Alexander Gates, Michael Gates, Salem Ghanem Al Ghanem, Daniel Glassford, Nicholas J. Gorblush, Tyler Goodwin, David S. Graham, Josh Gravelick, Ryan Greenwood, Dominic Rustini, Miranda Grubba, Random Guy Radio, Andres Guzman, Tyler Harris, Asa Haas, Josh Yeager, Clarence Johnson, Paul Joyce, Greg Juliffs, Jeremy Key, John Clote, Kevin Kamaki, Taylor Christian Laudrin, Christian Larson, Jackson Lassequa, Daniel Laws, Joe Lawson, Don Q. Lee, Ashlyn Lee, Anthony Lencioni, Patrick Leslie, Dustin Lewis, Keith Adrian Lewis, Chad Lewis, Mark Liberto, Lewin Ray Loper, Brendan Lyle, Josh M., Ryan T. Mandel, Michael Martello, Joe McPartlin, Albert Miranda, Mad Mock Media, Patrick Malloy, Betty Ann Moriarty, Abe Mukhtar, Brian Nietzsche, Connor Nesbitt, Josh Netzel, Adam Nix, Brian Ott, Jorge Palomino, Reed K. Parker, Todd Paxton, Brendan Peavy, Enrique Perez, Eric A. Peterson, Jason Pettit, Lawrence F. Prokop, Eric R. Pryor, Michael Renner, Peter Reynolds, Shane Rayum, Jonathan Rice, Toby D. Rymanschneider, Austin Riley, Ramon Rodriguez Jr., Petro Rose, A.G. Rowe, Matthew Savoy, John Scholes, Chris Schaefer, Toby Shootman, Gurman Sidhu, Riley Smith, Gerard Stawave, Stephen Summingett, Ahmad Tamar, Ben Thompson, Carl Tolman, Tam Tran, Esteban Valentin, Adam Van Kuren, Oakley Waldron, Justin Wagaman, Dade Michael Edward Wendt, Griffin West, Mike Want, Tyler Woodall, Corey Wyatt, Tony Zaniga, Casual Misfits Gaming, Supershot ST, Richter 86, Beric, Mubarak, Dav 9834, Chris, Wyatt Henry, and Donk 2015.